Good morning. Welcome to the October 5th, 2023 meeting of the Palo Alto Architecture.
Recording in progress.
Can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Chair Balte,
Present.
Vice Chair Rosenberg,
Present.
Board Member Adcock, Board Member Chen,
Present.
Board Member Hirsch. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome to our newest board member, Musam Adcock. Welcome. First item on our agenda is public comment. Do we have anyone in the public who wishes to address us on any item not on our agenda today?
No, I have no raised hands or speaker cards.
Thank you. Next item is agenda changes, additions, and deletions. Staff?
None today.
Thank you. I believe Board Member Hirsch asked to make a quick note on something today that you'd like to add at the end of the meeting. David?
Yes, good morning. Where there's a pressure to provide for an incredible amount of housing in Palo Alto, and it strikes me that this becomes an issue of urban design. And in order to describe what urban design is, let me just quickly run through quick items, and then maybe we would discuss all of this at the end of the meeting.
David, the point now is just to decide that.
All right, so
we'll
let's
discuss this at the end of our meeting.
I'd like to request time at the end of the meeting
Yes.
to discuss this issue.
We'll let you bring up what the issue is.
Yeah.
I don't want to go through a
If I
discussion
may.
that's not agendized.
If
Yeah.
I may, this doesn't sound like an agendized item.
It isn't.
Yeah, we're not going to discuss any content of anything. David wants to make a statement.
Okay, but we just said we are going to discuss it later, so.
Discuss is the wrong term. David would like to make a statement, and I'm giving him time at the end of the meeting to do that. Thank you, Jody. Next item is city official reports.
So I just wanted to check in with board members. We have we have fairly packed agendas as we come up to the end of the year. There is one last date in December, 12/21, and wanted to ask you guys to confirm with me. You don't have to do it today, but whether you guys are going to be available for the 12/21 meeting, so I can decide if there's going to be a quorum for that day or not. We will plan to cancel the January 4th meeting so that we're not reading packets or preparing packets over Christmas. So just wanted to give you guys a heads up on that. And then, hold on one second.
A quick question for you, if that's all right.
Sure.
As we get to the end of the year, is there any possibility to just add a few of the dates of the following year so that it's not like, right? See how this just ends at 12/21? So anyway, in the next packet, we could just add the month of January, just so we've got at least like a month heads up so that
Sure.
we're
Yeah.
looking ahead.
I think we could do that.
And I can confirm I will be here for all of those dates. So.
Okay. Okay. And in terms of upcoming items, we have a preliminary review for 616 Ramona, addition using transferred development rights in our downtown area. November 2nd, we're looking at two projects, a study session, first formal as a study session for the local advanced water purification system at the Regional Water Quality Control Plant, and another housing project at 739 Sutter. And November 16th, we have the second study session for the North Ventura Coordinated Area Plan. In terms of upcoming projects, I don't believe there were any actually new added projects since the last hearing. So.
Yes.
Apologies, I'm jumping in here again. For the 3000 El Camino, it said that board members Balte and Thompson were reporting out, but it didn't note that they had reported out. Can we just get that updated or adjusted? Sorry, on 3000 El Camino, it's on packet page 10.
Yeah, I think we've kind of held off on that. We're still there's a lot of attorney conversations going on with that project right now, trying to figure out how it's moving forward.
No problem.
So I think they kind of held off on doing a report out.
Okay.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Claire Raybold, could you, one item that I was unsure why we hadn't appointed a subcommittee was the 3400 El Camino Real housing project. That's an SB 330 Builder's Remedy application. What's the status of that, please? It says here, waiting for formal application.
It's a 330 only, in the very preliminary stages. So I don't think we've assigned anybody to that. I don't know that
What-
it's going to move forward.
What
as
is the status of that project? Do you have any more information on that?
It's an SB 330, so they filed an SB 330. They haven't filed a formal application yet.
So do you have plans for this project at all?
We have very vague plans and they have two totally different plans that they filed under SB 330, a
And they're-
builder's remedy option and a non-builder's
Are
remedy
you
option.
processing or reviewing those plans in any way, or is it just sitting there?
It was reviewed. They submitted compliant pre-applications, but aside from that,
Yeah, so for 3400 El Camino, which is the Creekside Inn property, we're in discussions with them because we don't believe we actually have a compliant SB 330 application because the project needs to be 2/3 housing.
mm,
And it doesn't appear to be that right now, but we're in discussions with them to finalize that.
Do you see any value in signing an ad hoc committee from the ARB at this point?
Probably not right this minute. I believe there's going to be some changes that happen. We also have the implementation of the housing element that's moving forward. And there's potentially this area might have a special rezoning happening.
Yeah.
And so then new projects would need to adhere to that new zoning. So it's sort of a changing environment right now.
Okay, so I think we should leave the board out of it for now, then. It sounds like good advice. I would like to, though, to my colleagues, mention that at the function the other night, I spoke with Planning Director Late, who mentioned that there's a need to come up with the revised design guidelines for parklets in Palo Alto. And I volunteered that the ARB would be happy to form an ad hoc committee to help with that process early on, which he was receptive to. So to my colleagues, I'd like to put out there that I would like for us to form an ad hoc committee to assist the planning department with parklet design. And I would like to be on that committee, but who would like to join me on that? Is there any volunteers or anybody, any information about that?
I'd love to.
You would too? Okay, so I'd like to appoint myself and Board Member Chen as members of that committee in advance of the city even doing anything about it, but I want to keep the pressure on that it's important, and the planning director asked that we do this, so. Yes, Jody.
Yeah, it's a great idea. And Amy French and I, the chief planning official, were just at a regional meeting in the city of Campbell, where they were showing us their parklets. They had two specific designs that were sort of pre-authorized. And they've got at least 3 parklets under construction right now. So those would be a good example to look at in the city of Campbell. And then Los Gatos, I believe, also has some examples, so.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so I would like for us then to reach out to you separately, and we'll set up a meeting for our ad hoc committee to push this forward. We're going to move to the, let's see, first action item here before we get started. Does anyone have to recuse themselves for this?
I'd like to get everybody's on the board's opinion. I personally do not think I need to recuse myself from the Stanford Shopping Center project, the first one on the agenda. But it was recommended that I do. And the issue is that I do projects at Stanford University, but nothing on Stanford lands that are leased to other basically developers. So I'm happy to do either way, but I'd like the board's opinion.
Yeah, I'm afraid the board can't weigh in on that. That's a direct thing, but I can let staff respond to your comments if you don't mind. Staff, do you have
That'd
a
be great.
response to Board Member Adcock's dilemma?
So at the advice of the attorney, it was determined that it would be most appropriate for Board Member Adcock to recuse herself in compliance with state law.
Well, I think she knows that. Do you have an opinion about the comment she just made, though, about being uncertain about that?
I think we were worried about the agenda and being a little bit out of order with the agenda, so we weren't fully listening.
Okay,
So I do have a housing presentation for you before this first item if you'd like, or we can change the
No, no,
agenda around.
Board Member Adcock will wait for us if she recuses herself, but she's uncertain what to do. And I'm afraid it really is your decision, Board Member Adcock, but you do have to decide now.
Can we
Sorry,
hear
can
the
we-
question again?
For the first project in discussion today, Stanford Shopping Center, I was advised to recuse myself from city
Yes.
attorney. I personally do not think there's any conflict, but I wanted to get the staff's input on that.
We believe there is a conflict and you could stay, but you may jeopardize the approval of that project if someone else believes that you should have recused yourself.
Isn't it also fair to let her know that it's entirely her decision?
Yes.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to jeopardize any decision, so I'm happy to recuse. I just wanted to make sure. My personal opinion is that there is no conflict because none of my projects have anything to do with Stanford Shopping Center. But yeah, that's fine. After the housing presentation, I will go work in the back room while I wait.
Thank you, Board Member Adcock.
You're very welcome.
We'll allow you to depart for this particular project.
And
So would you like me to give the
Yes.
housing presentation now or later?
we skipped over an item in the
oh, did
agenda.
I don't see that on,
The staff presentation providing a summary on state housing laws for multifamily.
I
housing.
apologize profusely. I missed that item.
That's okay.
We
It's
would
not
like
normal.
that presentation in the order you put it forward. So Board Member Adcock, please do not recuse yourself quite yet. Apologies, everybody.
Can I ask a question regarding this? The lawyer has made a statement about it. Are we entitled to see some of the backup on that, to understand it a little bit better relative to what our responsibilities really are here?
So I think it's a personal choice for each board member. And so I don't know that we would disclose someone else's personal information, but certainly, I mean, if you had a question about yourself or if you just had a generic question for the attorneys, are you asking for, I mean, we could do something sort of generic if that's what you're asking.
That seems to me to be appropriate at this point, is if he just tells us where the language is within the law and explains it to us in greater detail. In this case, it could be serious, and we've had this problem before, where there's a lot of projects that are on Stanford land one way or another, or, and we
So
we really need our 5 members here and their voice on a lot of projects. It's very useful that way, and it's sort of bothersome to have it cut off kind of prematurely here without having good knowledge as to why it could be dangerous or whatever.
Well, so the law states that for a source of income that is nonprofit organization, a conflict exists where the nonprofit owns real property that is the subject of the decision, even if they are not the named applicant. And so if you, as a board member, have income from a certain nonprofit, then under state law, we believe that a conflict exists if that source of income is a named applicant for an application, or the underlying landowner for that application.
Or is that a part of it, or the landowner itself is a part of the arrangement,
yeah.
is what you're saying?
Yes, if they're the real property owner.
real property owner. And is that the case here?
Yes, Stanford is the real property owner.
Of the land.
Excuse me, I'd like to not continue this
Yeah.
discussion now, David.
Okay, let's,
Sam, I would like,
Yeah.
staff, we would like to have the discussion of this separately and decide if it's something worth bringing to the board as a whole for a question and answer. We've done this several times and we don't want to jeopardize our
Mhm.
standing in the city.
Okay.
Certain advice should be taken seriously. Thank you. So could we do the staff presentation, please?
All right, so good morning, board members. For the audience, my name is Jody Gerhardt. I'm the manager of current planning. And so this morning I'm here to speak to you about recent housing laws and Palo Alto's streamlined process that came out of all of this. Now, there have been many changes to the law, especially around housing in recent years. And so even those in the planning profession are trying to keep up. So, well, I'm just going to go over some high level. Let's see if it will. How do I get it to advance? There we go. Okay. So, like I said, in order to combat the state's housing crisis, legislature has passed a number of laws in recent years, especially over the last 5 years, to increase the supply of housing. Today, I'm really just going to go over some high-level laws, including the housing element, the Housing Accountability Act, SB 330, the state density bonus law, and then get into our objective standards and our streamlined process. So regarding the housing element, this is something that is part of our comprehensive plan. It is an element that needs to be updated every 8 years. And a major component of the housing element is the regional housing needs allocation. So in this last cycle, the 6th cycle, California is requiring a total of 2.5 million new housing units, which is a significant increase over the 1.8 requirement from the previous cycle. For Palo Alto, our specific allocation is 6,086 units. The reason that we want to adhere to this, number one, it's the law, but also because it makes us eligible for a number of state funding programs, and it ensures that we maintain local control, because if we don't keep up with some of these numbers, other housing laws kick in. So the deadline for the housing element for the Bay Area, all the cities in the Bay Area, was January 31st of this year. There are many cities that were not able to make that date. However, our council did adopt the housing element on May 8th of this year. And we're still working with HCD to have that certified. Because of that, it sort of puts us in a gray area where builder's remedy is potentially possible. There is not a whole lot of law around this. It's very much uncharted territory. And so that's why I'm sort of speaking about it in not concrete terms. But essentially, developers that come in with 20% affordable housing as part of their project, and if it's a housing development project, which I'll give you a definition for in a second, those sorts of projects do not need to adhere to the current zoning code or our comprehensive plan. And so that we do have 3 pending projects in that situation, and we are working with them to see how to move forward. So that would be the Creekside project, the McDonald's Fish Market project, and there's a 3rd project on Fabian next to the JCC. So one of the other deadlines that we're working towards is January of next year. And the a follow-up part of a housing element. Once you have a housing element, you need to implement that housing element, which includes rezoning some properties, basically to upzone them to allow more housing so that we can meet this 6,000 unit requirement. So staff is already starting that portion. There was just a council meeting last night to bring council on board and kind of start that process. So the things that I'm going to be talking about today, for the most part, are housing development projects and the laws around them. A housing development project is defined as something that has residential units only, or it could be a mixed-use project, but it needs to have 2/3 of the square footage devoted to residential. It can also be transitional or supportive housing. So that's the first sort of entry point. So we worked with Jean Eisberg, our housing consultant, to put together some different handouts here. And if I'm lucky, they might be printed in the print shop. Veronica might check for us. So I'm gonna just showing you that. So that I sort of zoomed into pieces of this. The Housing Accountability Act is one of the first laws that we'll talk about today. It was passed in 1982, but in many years, the state has given it more teeth in recent years. And this one basically says that the city cannot deny a project, reduce its density, or otherwise make the project infeasible when the housing development project complies with objective standards. And that's also why, we went through that big push to do the objective design standards. So the next law that I'll talk about is SB 330. And you'll see the handout here. And then I zoomed in a little bit here. The main thing with SB 330 is that if a developer turns in a compliant project, a compliant pre-application, because it really is just a pre-application. They give us a very slim plan set and that sort of thing. And as long as it has the 2/3 housing and that sort of thing, then they can freeze the standards. And so any, new zoning codes that we may put in place would not apply to that project. And that freezing happens for up to 180 days. And it's based on the day that they submit that compliant SB 330 application. There's also too, when they get to the formal stage, there can be some tweaks to the project, and about 20% sort of tweaks are allowed, and they can still remain frozen with the standards. Other parts of SB 330. I'm sorry, my screens are getting in the way. There is a 5 hearing limit. You've heard us, talk about that. And this is for projects that are consistent with the zoning code and the comprehensive plan. So your standard ARB project would have this 5 hearing limit. That does include appeal hearings. And so staff is sometimes needing to, reserve a hearing for that. If it is a rezoning, a PHZ or something similar, there is not this limit on the rezonings. 330, SB 330 also prohibits cities from enforcing subjective design standards established after January 1st of 2020. Existing standards can continue to be applied. So we do have our objective design standards that we put in place. We also have the original context-based design criteria that was established a long time ago and can still be in place as well. We cannot downzone properties. We need to, maintain the existing floor area and things of that nature. There's also protection of units. We want to make sure that there's basically no net loss of units, but that also includes bedrooms as well. We don't want to have a loss of bedrooms. And lastly, the CEQA review can be streamlined. Once the CEQA is adopted, there are now some shot clocks that kick in to ensure that the project continues moving forward in a timely fashion. So that was SB 330, the quick version. And please, I mean, this is a lot. It's been a lot for, me and my staff to learn. And so we can definitely, keep doing this and do more in depth later on too. So this is just the high level version. The next law is the state density bonus. The bonus allows developers to increase density of their projects in exchange for providing affordable housing units. So you'll see in the upper right-hand corner is sort of the entry point for this law. So if you had, 10% low income in your project or 5% very low, then you would be eligible for this bonus. And there's, other versions there too. This is in combination with the 15% affordable that the city already requires. But if you do those sorts of low or very low incomes or similar, then you can get up to a 50% bonus in density. So the 50% bonus, you would need to do 15% very low. Otherwise, you could do 24% low income. Also, if your project's 100% affordable, then you could have an 80% bonus. And these, you're eligible for the bonus. You don't actually have to build bonus units. You really just have to do the affordability to be eligible for the rest of this law, because there are more things that you can take advantage of. So there are concessions and waivers for projects that abide by this law. Waivers are unlimited and generally for physical constraints, such as height limits, daylight planes, setbacks, things of that nature can be waived. Also, some of our objective design standards, those are physical limitations that could be waived as well. The other part is you can have concessions, depending upon the affordability, you can have from 1 to 4 concessions. Those are generally for financial limitations. So, we do have ground floor retail requirements. You could use a concession to eliminate that requirement. Open space, sounds like a physical limitation, but also is financial. It costs money to provide that open space. So there are many changes that you can do there. This is the backside of that handout. It just goes into, and sorry if I make you dizzy here. It goes into, you can see the number of concessions line there, the 1, 2, 3, 4. It talks about the level of affordability versus the number of concessions you get. It's complicated, but there is a formula. Regarding parking, there is reduced parking that these projects can take advantage of. Basically, the one space, for a 1-bedroom, we already have in our code, but the 1.5 spaces, we would normally require 2 spaces. So that's a reduction for these sorts of projects. And then we have just sort of examples at the bottom here that say if you do 15% very low income, you could start with a 10-unit project with the 50% density bonus, then you can be up to 15 units. And only 2 of those would need to be the very low income units. Otherwise, there's lots of options. Another option is you could do 20% low income. This gives you a 35% bonus, and 6 of those units would need to be low income because you're doing the percentage, the 20% of 30 units gets you to 6. That was confusing me last night. So with that, I'll move on to more local regulations. I've been talking about our objective design standards that we put in place July of 2022. And we've got a website and everything where you can see the details of that. It's also been incorporated now into 1824 of our zoning code. Now, the entry point for those objective design standards is a tiny bit different. It's for housing development projects. The difference is it's for multifamily. So 3 units or more would be using those objective design standards. But again, mixed use, 2/3 residential, transition and supportive housing. But then we also limit it by the zones, but these are really the multifamily zones, so. And as part, when we did the objective design standards, we also built a new process, a streamlined process. We basically said, if you follow these objective design standards, then we will usher you through the process that much quicker, because we feel like by following those objective standards, those black and white standards, you have essentially met the ARB's findings already. And so at the top here, you'll see the colored boxes. There's an entry point, housing development projects have to meet the entry point. There's the light green box. Everyone has to adhere to height limits, setbacks, FAR, that sort of thing. But then these streamlined projects have to adhere to the objective design standards, and they have to adhere to any guidelines or area plans. If they do all of that, then they get to go to the last yellow box, which is to have one ARB study session where staff presents you the checklist of the objective design standards. We let you know that we believe the project has met all of those standards, and we're here just to sort of confirm that everyone's in agreement with that. If you don't meet the entry point or don't, do some of these objective design standards, then on the bottom, sort of the white boxes, you can always opt into the discretionary review. And this is something, unique to Palo Alto, that we sort of set it up this way. And if you want to go discretionary, then it is our standard ARB process that we've done for years. You still, in the large green box, have to adhere to all the setbacks and FARs. But now you're weighing yourself against the context-based design criteria. And that was, a choice by council to continue using those. We also have the ARB findings, and then you have up to 3 hearings that those sorts of projects would go through. So back to the streamlined process, there are just 2 findings for that new streamlined process. And we'll make sure you have a copy of these. And I believe they're in the stuff in the packet today. Lastly, this is AB 2097. This applies to almost any project in the city. So it goes beyond housing projects, but will affect housing projects as well. The only thing is hotels and event centers still need to provide parking. They're not included in this, but all other uses are included in this, I say requirement, but it's sort of the opposite, benefit, I should say. So if you are within a half mile of a major public transit, then you do not need to provide parking. The definition for major public transit is complicated, but it does say, transit stops being Caltrain. It is our major transit stops. It also talks about intersecting buses, but they need to have a 15-minute headway. They need to be frequent buses, and they need to be intersecting. So we have a lot of buses on El Camino, but we don't have frequent bus service on Page Mill or some other similar intersecting street. And so therefore, we don't have those sort of intersecting bus locations that other cities may have. So for us, it's just the 3 areas that you see on the screen, which is the 3 half-mile circles around the Caltrain stations. So we've got, University, Cal Ave, and then San Antonio Caltrain station does come into our city a little bit with the half-mile radius. So in those areas, they do not need to provide parking. However, if they do provide parking, it becomes sort of voluntary that a developer could provide parking in those areas. We would apply the same ratios as far as like ADA and electric vehicle sort of parking to whatever they provide. Usually ADA and EV are a percentage. And so it would be the same percentage of the spaces that they provide. We're also working on TDM regulations. We already have in our code that, if you reduce parking, you would need to provide a TDM program, a transit demand management program, which a lot of times results in developers providing train passes or something similar to their employees. And so we're working on a system where that would be the case here as well. So with that, that's the end.
Excellent presentation. Thank you so much, Judy Gerhart. I'd like to allow us to ask a brief round of questions. We have applicants waiting for this, so each board member will be given 1 chance, and we'll even say it no more than 5 minutes per member, just to keep us from going overboard.
So this is an informational item, so we cannot have a discussion on
We're
the
not
item
asking
today.
discussion, we're asking questions. Questions
Okay,
are for clarification.
But I think staff can't necessarember respond to those questions.
Use your judgment, we'll use ours.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does anybody
we're
have any
happy to take them
questions
down.
for staff on this presentation? Board Member Hirsch? 5 minutes, please, if we could set a timer.
Oh, it'll
for that.
be briefer than that. It's just, so all of this has been published. It's really quite impressive. And I wonder if when do we get a copy of it all?
We can send you one today.
Yeah, it'll be today.
Does the print shop work?
Yes, I didn't give them much time. It was sort of a rush job. So we'll go look. I'll go look in a minute and see if we have them already.
That's it? Anybody else?
I'm digesting. I might have questions at some point in the future, but great presentation. Thank you.
Actually, PDF copy would be great too, just to keep us, up to date. And the other item is, I think it was for SB 330, I think it was the subjective standards or objective, I forget, from 2020. If we could get a, kind of the, I think it's kind of like date stamp basically, because for future projects that apply SB 330 have to like follow.
So
the
for the most part, we have worked our way through a lot of the projects that came before.
Okay.
We're now starting to get into the projects where objective standards, objective design standards apply. We are on the cusp of that. And so in our staff reports, we will be careful to tell you,
Which
what
standards
side of the
apply.
line we're
Okay.
on.
I don't know that we have any projects actually that still are not subject to the
Objective
objective
test,
standards. I
yeah.
think we've
Okay.
already processed any of those, so.
Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Yeah, lots of things to digest, but I do make some notes while I'm listening to the presentation. So a couple of things maybe I left, but first one is the state density bonus law. Is the bonus to the number of the units or to the floor area or to what?
So kind of both. Really, we're one or the other. If we have a density restriction, then it's first based on that. If we don't have a density restriction, then it starts becoming more based on FAR and how many units you could fit in that FAR and then calculating the number off that. That's what it gets complicated quickly.
Okay, another one is there is 3 categories of what's that called? The housing element, the housing development categories. One of them is the transitional and supportive housing. So if say it include the transitional housing, but it also has some commercials, like the mixed use down below. Does it still meet the 2/3 requirement or?
So, sorry,
No, I understand the question. It's supportive housing with retail. I would, yeah, let me get back to you.
Sure, yeah, and my last but not least one is for the new streamlined entitlement process. And I noticed at the very bottom, it says that for all the other projects that also include the commercial project, it limited up to 3 ARB meetings. Is this something new or it's always like this?
it's always, it's just
Okay.
a standard process that it's always been.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. You can restart the timer, please, to be fair. First question was regarding SB 330, where it's required that we have no downzoning. Is a daylight plane considered downzoning, implementation of a daylight plane or changing daylight plane standards?
That's probably sort of in a gray area.
So there's no current consensus on
I
what
mean, but because there's daylight planes that are this and there's daylight planes that are this. So
that seems rather subjective.
If
That-
you're saying, if it affects density, basically.
Everything affects density theoretically. Daylight planes, I believe, are important. So objective standards, you said that you're still required to comply with design guidelines and area plans. Aren't those generally subjective?
Yes, so it's only to the extent that they are objective.
And how is that
Which I-
determination published or made somehow clear to everybody? What is the objective portion of those standards? How does an applicant know that?
It's a good question. We're working through that.
Yes.
Okay. On AB 2097, if your project is within half a mile of transit, is that any corner of your property or the entirety of your property in order to trigger that exemption?
I believe it's 75% of the property needs to be within a half mile.
So 70% of the area of the property. Great. Those are my only questions. Thank you.
And we do have maps online that are detailed enough to show that.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that, but the maps are published of what that half-mile radius zone is.
Don't know that we've put the maps on the internet. My staff absolutely has access to
They're
them.
publicly available, though.
Yes, the public can come in and talk to my staff and receive that information.
At the
Great.
development center, you can go, we can help you go online and you can look up in GIS, like where that
Perfect.
half mile buffer ends.
Okay, no more questions. Anyone else? So we're going to move on to the next item on our agenda. Thank you very much for that presentation. It was very informative. And thank you for tolerating us and the public out there. Okay, next item then is 180 El Camino Real. So do we have anyone who likes to recuse themselves?
I think that would be me, so I'll be in the back room. Let me know when I can come back in.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Okay. Okay, this item is 180 El Camino Real. Recommendation on applicant's request for approval of a minor architecture review board application to allow exterior modifications, including a newly designed facade for the previously approved 3-story standalone building restoration hardware at the Stanford Shopping Center. No modifications are proposed to any site design details, and there is no change of use. So before we start the hearing on that item, I'd like to ask if we have any disclosures to make.
Yes, I'd like to disclose that I visited the property and I also went through the previous items regarding this project, reviewed the information packets and familiarized myself with this project.
Thank you so much. Board Member Chen.
I visited the site yesterday and also I reviewed the previous meeting videos.
Thank you. I disclosed that I also visited the site earlier this week and I was on the board for those previous meetings. And Board Member Hirsch has stepped away for a second, but I think we'll ask him when he returns in. So let's continue with our staff presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair, board members. Tamara Harrison, Michael Baker International, presenting as contract planner for staff. Again, this action item is 180 El Camino Real for restoration hardware modifications.
Tamara, could you hold 1 second, please?
Absolutely.
Board Member Hirsch, we just went through board disclosures. Do you have anything to disclose regarding the project? No disclosure. Okay, thank you. Please continue, Planner Harrison.
Thank you. Again, the project's located at 180 El Camino Real, and it's for the new 3-story standalone restoration hardware building that is currently under construction at the site. As the site is located within the Stanford Shopping Center, it is subject to the center's master tenant facade and sign program. And the master program requires that major tenants and freestanding buildings require city review. So due to the extent of the proposed modifications for the building, this particular project required a board level review. Restoration hardware will be located once completely constructed at the Sand Hill Road and Shopping Center Way entrance into the Stanford Shopping Center. And the applicant currently seeks to modify the previously approved exterior facade of the building. The building was previously approved as part of the overall Macy's Men's redevelopment project back in February of 2020. And the applicant proposes exterior facade changes that are inclusive of a lighter color palette, removal of various large light sconces, removal of various green walls and other green features, modified door pulls, and Italian limestone trim and cap has now been proposed in various areas of the building. Well, I'll walk through elevation by elevation and try to go through some of the key changes for the elevation. So we'll start with the north elevation here. And top illustration, what you will see is what was previously approved under the Macy's Men's redevelopment project. And then the bottom illustrations are going to be inclusive of the current proposal with the modifications. So as you can see from the two illustrations here, there's a green wall that has been removed from the elevation. So you can see in the top illustration that the green wall exists up on that 3rd level. That has been removed, as well as a portion of the green wall that is cascade, I guess, down amongst the doorway. The Italian limestone trim cap will be used kind of at the patio balcony deck areas, I will call them. So that's been added to the elevation. And then also the large wall light sconces have been moved. So there were 4 that were removed on this elevation. For the south elevation, similarly, the green walls have been removed again. The Italian limestone trim and cap has been introduced, and then there are 4 light sconces that were removed from this elevation as well. As far as the east elevation, we have 2 sections of the upper facade elevation that had green walls removed, as well as some landscaping features along kind of like those pop out areas, if you will. There's a total of 8 light sconces from this elevation that have been removed, and then the green columns were replaced with potted plants for the elevation. As far as the west elevation, again, we also have the introduction of the limestone trim cap. And then again, I should mention that the door pulls apply to all the doors on the exterior facade as well. And then this one has 4 light sconces that were removed, and then reduced landscaping on the top level as well as the lower level of the elevation. These illustrations here just show the color and materials board. So the top left, you have the current proposed lighter color palette, if you will, and then the previously approved color palette to the right here, as well as the materials, which you can see were a much darker tone. The key considerations for the project, of course, were the ARB findings as well as the master tenant and facade program. And staff recommends that the Architectural Review Board take the following action and consider the proposed facade modifications and recommend that the ARB continue the proposed project or recommend approval to the Director of Planning and Development Services. This concludes staff presentation, and I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Planner Harrison. Why don't we move on to applicant presentation? Do we have the applicant here or online to make a presentation? Good morning. You'll have 10 minutes to speak. If you could please state and spell your name for the record, we'd appreciate it.
Morning. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
My name is Michael Avalone with RH, MICHAEL, AVELLONE. So we'd like to take this opportunity to kind of walk you guys through the updates as outlined in the presentation. We've put together some slides to illustrate the improvements that we're making to the gallery. We've seen this as an opportunity, given that our building was approved back in 2019, 2020, to evolve the building at Stanford as a new foray into our future palette and presentation of our product. If we can go to the next slide. So the massing and a majority of the building remains the same, as well as landscaping on the building. We've retained a lot of the character defining features of awnings, balconies, a stepped cornice, and heritage olive trees around the perimeter of the building. We've really distilled this down to 3 items that are updating and improving the quality of the building. The first being a stone parapet cap of Italian limestone. Previously, on many of our other buildings, we use a cast stone, a very conventional material that complements our dark gray plaster. And looking at the context here, within our Mediterranean climate and Stanford, we've proposed a limestone that complements the new light velvety finish of the plaster. The plaster is a lime-based cementitious plaster. It is composed of local sand and seashell aggregate from the Monterey area. So it's a proprietary product. It's a local product as opposed to our previously used and approved dark gray plaster, which was a La Habra stucco product. And to complement the plaster and the new velvety finish of the walls, we are looking to update the exterior metal color, which is a light, warm champagne color, as opposed to our dark metal black storefront and awnings, which can be seen in many other buildings that we've done to date. The original approval in Palo Alto was a replica of our building in Corte Madera in Marin County. From the finishes to some of the detailing with the large sconce lights that we are proposing to remove from the building can all be seen in numerous buildings that we've done to date, dating all the way back to Houston, which is from 2011. And so the evolution of our brand and our architecture has really evolved since then and since the approval of the original building. The last building you'll see on the bottom right there is our gallery in Marin and Corte Madera, which opened in 2020, right around the approvals of this building. And so as we move into the next round of galleries and our product assortment and offerings have evolved and updated, the gallery really presents that and will evolve with it. And so I will say, if we go to the next slide, the majority of the massing, the detailing is consistent with what has been done to date. We have removed select moldings around window openings to simplify, or sorry, not to simplify, but to really enhance the plaster and the workmanship of the plaster. All of the details that we're looking at from the outside also translates to the interior of the building. So our finishes on the inside are also being updated to complement the exterior finishes, which also complements the product assortment for the gallery. On the front here, you'll notice we are still retaining the large heritage olive trees on the ground floor, as well as the perimeter boxwood hedging around the level 3 roof terrace there. We can go to the next page. The side elevation remains mostly unchanged with the exception of removing of the large sconces. In order to provide a more resilient building and a more maintenance-free building, we are proposing to remove hedging that was proposed on the back half of the building to screen the mechanical walls. That is something that we're open to your feedback on and discussion on, but we would propose to remove that from a maintenance standpoint on our buildings and provide a more resilient building and final product. We can go to the next page. The rear of the building is really where you'll see those 2 areas of ivy that we're proposing to remove on the 3rd floor. That's concealing a mechanical terrace that is behind those walls. So we're proposing just to finish those in plaster to be complementary to the rest of the building. And then if we look at the next page, same comments here where we're looking at removing 4 of the large metal sconces, which those sconces are in our galleries in Yountville, San Francisco, and Corte Madera. So they're very prevalent in our previous work, and we see this as an opportunity to define the building here in Palo Alto and Stanford as the next generation and not pull in those old details from past buildings. These are the proposed finishes. As we've discussed, the plaster is the biggest change I would say to the building. It's a local product. We've been doing extensive mock-ups on site to really evaluate the finish, the quality of the plaster, the relation to the metal color, which is a custom Benjamin Moore metallic color for the light tracery storefront and awnings, and then the Italian limestone that will be used in mostly areas where customers and clients can touch and feel the building on parapet caps and railings. I would suggest that a majority of the things that we are not changing to the site, the bluestone, the California gold, the heritage olives, all feel very complementary to this palette and supports the direction and the identity that the brand is moving forward with. That's all I had.
Thank you very much. You can have a seat. We'll open this now to public comment. Do we have any members of the public who wish to address us on this item?
No public comments.
Okay, we'll close the meeting to public comment. Do we have any questions from the board to the applicant or staff? Questions? I'm wondering where the champagne color sample is, that complementary metal trim. Is that over here on our material boards? The color sample for the accent metal, window trim, etc. So the horizontal chip is the color sample. Wonderful, thank you. A secondary question for the applicant again. For the applicant, a question regarding the light sconces. Why did you choose to remove the light sconces altogether rather than just change the style?
Again, we see those as a vestige of kind of the old design and architecture of our buildings. They do require a lot of maintenance and waterproofing to the building and to the system. So to create a more resilient building, we would like to remove those as well.
But light fixtures are still a large portion of Restoration Hardware sales, right? You guys, you're not stopping your sales of light fixtures.
We are not.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Any other questions for the applicant or staff?
So, yes.
Go ahead, Board Member Hurd.
So your assumption is that lighting the building in the evening is going to be more or less internal with the large openings that you have in the perimeter. How does that work actually in where, you're not showing an elevation here, or at least I haven't. On the side that faces into the shopping center itself, where there are really no windows on that side? the roadway goes through at that point. What are you doing about lighting in that area?
We've retained majority of the architectural lighting on the building, which includes building uplights and a cornice uplight from the previous approval. The sconces are just more decorative.
Got it.
And I should say the large sconces are not an RH product as well, so they're not
Okay.
necessarily supportive for our company.
Is there still going to be, you have your olive trees there. I've noticed that there's a hedging and that you'll be removing the hedging, I guess, and the olive trees will really be by themselves, the feature.
The hedging will remain. It's been removed from this
Oh.
rendering for clarity, but
Oh,
the
okay.
perimeter hedging would remain.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. So those are sort of sales areas still with furniture in them?
That's correct.
Okay. But there's no closure to them. They're open to the outside.
They're open with gates that will be open during business hours.
Yeah. Oh, during business hours. Yeah.
Yep.
How do you close them?
Our store team will close down the gates at the end of the operations of the hours and
There-
lock them.
There are gates in the hedges themselves?
Yes, there's gates at the entrances to the walkways within the courtyards.
Does that show in our drawings or have anybody else seen those gates?
I should say they're the same gates that we proposed from the original approval, just we would update the color of those gates.
Okay. And those will be repeating the metal color of the awnings?
That's correct.
Okay. The top floor then is the dining facility, right? Within the,
Yes, the rooftop restaurant.
does that stay lit during the nighttime in some sense to keep some light in that area?
It is lit during nighttime when it's open, and then there's a night setting on our lighting fixtures for dimming, but still providing some light within the gallery along the perimeter of the building.
Okay.
And a majority of the internal lights will be off.
And the furniture that is shown in the entry to the building, there's a setup of furniture at that location. Does that remain then at night?
Correct, that remains. Yep.
So how do you protect that to vandalism potentially there?
We have a few ways we do that. We do the same thing in Corte Madera. We have a lot of outdoor furniture out there, so we'll cover the furniture during inclement weather. We've also looked at very discreet ways to anchor the furniture down to the surface. We're also working with the mall security, which will monitor those courtyard areas at night for us.
Okay, I think that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Board Member Hirsch. Board Member Rosenberg.
Thank you for your presentation. Do you guys have an LRV of the new plaster color?
We have one for the metal color, not the plaster color.
Okay, what is it for the metal?
36.66.
Okay, and you do not have one for the plaster at this time. Is there a way that you'd be able to get that information?
We can provide that.
Okay, that'd be great. You had also mentioned that some of your door hardware was being updated as well. Is that just the style choice, changing that?
That's correct. Yeah, there's a new finish to the hardware pulls as previously approved.
Being like, but the style, the actual shape of the hardware is not changing, it's just the color?
It's the color and a very minimal change to the style, but it's still a large bar pull.
Okay. The green walls on the upper levels. So the reason for removing those and hiding that is so that you have an easier time with maintenance of the side exterior of the building. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then the lighting, the light fixtures. So the majority of your lighting appears to be uplighting, and based on the previous, the examples of the other ones that have been completed, a majority of that really is that uplighting as well. So you chose to keep the uplighting from the previous designs, but remove the sconces.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, the uplighting really is to highlight the architecture of the building and uplight the facade and cap that with the stepped cornice lighting.
Okay.
A lot of times those large sconces actually create shadows up the building and are not necessarily a key detail for us to bring into future buildings.
Okay.
We have those on many other buildings, and we'd like to remove that as part of our vocabulary for the new contemporary architecture.
And then lastly, it looks like the majority of the windows and doors on the first, actually on the second floor as well, are those all operable, or is it some of those are fixed doors? They're just meant to look like doors? Do
They're fixed, meant to look like doors
Okay.
on the sides. Yes.
you have any concerns about confusion of people trying to open the wrong doors?
Well, that's part of why we do not make them operable anymore, is so that people don't go to a door that looks like a door, but it can't be opened. So we've removed hardware from the inside of the building so that people don't think it's operable from the sales floor.
And would you mind clarifying which doors are actually operable?
Sure, it's the entry facade on the ground floor, the large 25-foot opening.
And those all are basically bifolding all the way open?
Correct. It's a large bifolding door that's on the front and rear of the building. Every opening on the north and south side, levels 1 and 2 are fixed. Every opening on the loggia terraces are operable. So there's 3 openings on each side. And then they are all fixed on the rear of the building, with exception of the main 25-foot slide and fold door.
Okay, so just for clarification on sheet RH6, and sorry to be nitpicky, I'm just making sure we all understand. On RH6, 1 north elevation, it does show that one of these side doors does still have the swing operation. Is that just a typo?
That's
or-
correct. It still is a
Okay, that
swing
one
door.
is still, okay,
Yep.
got it. Okay. And that was all my questions for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Rosenberg. Board Member Chen, any questions?
Yeah, I have a quick question. So I was there yesterday and I saw the west facade is open without any scaffold wrap. So I want to know, are the colors, the finish there exposed to facing the west now? Is it going to be the final finish, or there's still some extra work to do,
That is very indicative of what the final finish will look like.
including the wall and the trellis, the metal part?
The trellis is still underway, but the facade, the plaster, and the storefront
Okay.
and the awnings that are installed would be indicative of the final finish.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, then we can ask you to take your seat and we'll deliberate on this project. Who would like to go first with their discussion of this?
I'll go.
Go ahead, Ken.
Why not? So thank you again for the presentation. This is a pretty dramatic change from your previous submittal and from what was previously approved. So clearly it needed to come back and be reevaluated. We often have projects, especially in today's sort of aesthetic climate, that really want to lean lighter and brighter and whiter. One of the things that we constantly are battling with that is how white is too white and how bright is too bright. I would say that actually I find this one to be very aesthetically pleasing. I think that this is a very beautiful sort of creamy color without being too white. I really would like to have that LRV number just so we know what we're working with here. But based on the samples we have in the chambers right now, I think that you guys have found a really nice balance of being light and bright without being overwhelmingly stark. The amount of punctures and holes that you have in sort of the back and forth of the facades as well. Looks like we have a little field trip here. Sorry. Is this the cutest little field trip you ever saw? I'm gonna let them
Director of Public Works.
pass through. Gosh, they're cute. Sorry, lost my train of thought there.
So let's capture our train of thought and keep going, please.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Sorry for the interruption. Really do appreciate the work that's gone into this. And while it is a dramatic shift, I think that if this came to us fresh, we'd be looking at it with happily. my concerns are two. One, the green walls at the top really did provide quite a bit of aesthetic sort of breakup and shadow and texture to that upper level. I'm not as concerned about the vertical elements on the sides, but those upper level portions. And now that this building is white, it's making it that much more noticeable that those white stark walls are up there. So I am really a little hesitant to be okay with the removal of those upper level green walls. Additionally, I think that, you know, wall sconces, and you guys sell them. I mean, I would absolutely understand removing some. I would absolutely understand changing the fixture. But I think it is really important for wayfinding of the public, for safety, for warmth, for security, to have a certain amount of wall sconces that are visible. If nothing else, you have a lot of doors on this building. And to help highlight where people are supposed to enter, to help highlight this is the main point of entry. So I am, again, hesitant to be okay with the full removal of all of the sconces. I think that maybe we can tailor it or adjust it, but full removal is something that I'm a little bit concerned about. And I'd love to hear my fellow board members' thoughts on this as well. So thank you. That's all my comments for now.
Thank you, Board Member Rosenberg. Board Member Hirsch? Oh,
Well, I can simply react to my fellow board member here.
please do.
Some degree, I kind of agree with the part of this, what you stated here about the shape of the building. We've always really thought this is going to be an elegant building in proportions. So we're not questioning something like that, but if you look at the elevations, the one that has the dining facility up there doesn't have that much problem with the end walls of the perimeter. Simply the focus is much more on the dining.
Which elevation, David?
The one on RH5, which has the entire dining facility and
That's what you call the front elevation, right?
front, that's really the front elevation. That one really
Sure, that's
doesn't
particular.
need anything on the side walls. I think it kind of the opposite one certainly does have that problem. So there's a difference there in two
Yeah, of
elevations.
course.
And those are the two main elevations. The sides, the sides that face Sand Hill, or the side that faces into the building, into the rest of the shopping center, those are, I guess, going to be what they're going to be, because in terms of the lighting, I think you probably have answered my question in terms of the uplighting that you'll be using on the faces of the building. I think it's much better. I think it's a terrible idea to have sconces that have up shadows like as you imagine they would be if they're in areas where they are uplit like that. That really doesn't work at all. So I think that removing those sconces is a good idea. And uplighting is a better way to light the building, the massing of the building itself. But as to what to do with the upper wall and this other elevation, I don't have any really great suggestion for you to whether you go back to. There is a connection between your ground level greenery and the possibility of putting it on the building, I think. So that I don't think it's out of place to have it up above. But it's really a choice matter for yourselves to consider on that. Maybe in terms of looking at the building from that side isn't so critical. I understand it's it's a somewhat minor entry issue on that side, which you're emphasizing the opposite side, and it really works very well there to not have the greenery up above. That's really, I mean, I think that this, again, every step along the way, it advances the design. So it's a significant improvement. And it's really interesting that you kind of look back at your building and and the sequence of it and with the relative to the others, and you learn each time a little something about the past one that you'd like to really do a little bit better. So the elegance is continuing to grow each building as you produce it. So thank you very much for a really good presentation and some really interesting design sequences here.
Thank you, Board Member Hirsch. Board Member Chen.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I think generally speaking, the lighter color palette, I think is a good move. And I think it's make the building more elegant and more attractive, especially as what you're showing for the rendering, the night view. However, I have some concerns about the colors of the metal, the champagne color or the metal chip that you're showing there. I think they're too, the colors are too close to each other. I hope there could be some contrast between the metal and the plaster, the wall. Just a little bit more, because when I was there yesterday, I saw, okay, it's just a big light color building, because it is nice that you choose a cream color, but under the sunshine, it make the building look even more brighter and lighter. So I think some contrast between the trellis and the wall is necessary, and to make it more detailed, because you have lots of good details there. And also, I think it would be nice if you could keep the green wall on the upper level, because it will soften the building. Otherwise, it will be just a big blank wall there. So green wall will help to, and all the landscapes you're showing around the building will help soften the wall, the design. As far as the lighting fixture, I agree with Vice Chair Rosenberg said. I think you should keep some lighting fixtures on the wall sconce on the exterior wall. So because in my mind, all of your buildings are more like a showcase of your products. So if you can choose some lighting fixtures and put it on the wall, and then your potential clients will see, okay, there are some nice products there. So if you can now choose something that fits your building, it will be a huge challenge to your potential customers as well. So I would highly recommend you to put some wall sconce there. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Chen. I find myself in agreement with what's been said previously. Just looking at it from the point of our findings, if this had come to us originally with the lighter color, I think we would have approved it. It's an elegant looking building. I think, however, we would have been more concerned even about the apparent bulkiness of the building. It's a large building. When you go out and see it formed now, it's quite big. And some of the walls facing not the front elevation are large, and they jump at you. To that extent, we had, when we first approved it, really appreciated the greenery up on the top. It reduced the apparent bulk. The light fixtures helped give it more texture and reduce your attention to the large walls. And then the contrasting trim, the dark colors and such, really took it a long way. So to that effect, I think you should consider a higher contrast on the trim color. I think you should keep the green walls as originally proposed, and I think you should keep decorative light sconces or some other decorative elements that are similar in scale on the lower levels of the building. The light sconces were a great solution. If they don't work from a maintenance point of view or from a uplighting point of view, then find something else. But having nothing, I think, is not acceptable. And to my mind, the light color just accentuates that issue. So I think if it had been that way at the beginning, we would have had an issue with it then. So I'll be brief, but I think that we should recommend that the color come back to a subcommittee, and the other two items, the green walls and the light fixtures, remain as originally approved. Any other comments on this?
One clarification. So for the lighting fixture, can they choose the new style of the lighting fixture, but keep the same location or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think it's quite reasonable to say they want to upgrade the building style and design, and that's what restoration, at least in restoration hardware in my mind, is all about. I'd love to see it be some new style that you're pushing. But it needs to be something.
Right, yeah.
And I don't think we need to see that back at a subcommittee level. They should pick the light fixture and the door handles and things as they see fit. They're talented architects. I'm just looking for overall compatibility with our community. Large light colored buildings are something we generally have difficulty with. So I would be all for having the LRV value of the plaster come back, but looking at the sample here, I'm quite comfortable with that. So any other comments, Board Member Hirsch?
Well, you know, because we like to reach a kind of a consensus on things, you know. I kind of agree now, looking at RH2, that the bulk of the upper part of the building is emphasized way too much, and could really agree that the planting is probably going to be useful to kind of reduce the feeling of the upper bulk of the building. And agree with Commissioner Chen's comment about the metal being more contrasty against the lighter background. So those, I agree with your comment that it could be done through a committee rather than back to the board, certainly. So I think that you could sum up the.
So let's check. The Board Member Rosenberg, are you comfortable with the question about the trim color, the greater contrast?
Yes, I am. I don't even think it needs to be dramatic, but I do think it, tweaking that a little bit more. I agree with the Board Member Chen that would be a benefit.
So the only thing I've not heard us be completely in consensus on was the light fixtures.
Yeah.
And I had proposed that perhaps they keep light fixtures of a similar scale but new design, and that doesn't need to come back to subcommittee. They can run with it. I think it's also possible to come up with a different design element that would fit the same purpose, but then I think that would need to come back to an ad hoc committee. Would that make you comfortable, Board Member Hirsch, that we're responding to your question about casting shadows through uplighting, which is not desirable?
Yeah, you know, I suppose if
That's
it's
a design issue, really.
It's yeah, and if it's a product that's, I'm sort of thinking about it, if it's mostly glass, you know, as a fixture, it doesn't really do much shadowing.
These are sophisticated designers, and I've got to think that they'll study and understand the effect of uplighting on their building.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's something we can let them run with.
Absolutely.
Board Member Rosenberg, you're looking to make a comment.
Yeah, I have one more. It's a reasonably small comment. I think that I just would like to clarify with the board that I'm not as concerned about the removal of the light fixtures on the sides of the building. It's really the front facade and the back facade. So I'd love to hear a consensus about whether the other board members think that they could remove the side light fixtures and just focus on the front and the back, or whether they think it's important to keep all of them.
Which elevations? Let's be specific here then.
Sure thing. So on elevation RH7, keeping the 4 on that facade. On RH8, they could remove all of them. Let me go backwards. Apologies. I started in the middle there. On RH6, again, they could remove the side ones. I think that that's appropriate because wayfinding, right? Nobody's walking in on the side of the building. But again, on RH5, keeping those front 4 makes sense. But I'd love to hear what the other board members think, if just removing the sides makes those facades too dull, or if we're trying to find a compromise in the middle. I think that.
So I think that the elevation RH6 is the one facing the side street. Is that Sand Hill Road? There's a whole bunch of oak trees there, and they're hardly ever visible. So I think those probably don't matter as much. This whole elevation is pretty well shaded from public view and covered by the trees, et cetera.
Agree.
This building is really uptight against that hedge line there. The other side, however, is extremely visible from all this new stuff being built there. And I'm uncomfortable not having anything. I agree that the right 2 light fixtures seem a bit more tacked on and applied, but that's because it's a pretty large piece of facade. Ideally, you'd make the windows bigger maybe, but we don't want to get into that. That's all finished. So I think I could support no light fixtures on the north elevation, but not the south. What else? Who else has an opinion on it? Board Member Chen.
Yeah, agree. We can move the ones on the north and keep the other three elevations the same, something there.
Board Member Hirsch, what's your take on this?
I'm okay with that suggestion.
And just for clarity, Board Member Bolte, you were saying that on the south elevation, you'd remove the 2 light fixtures on the right side. That's RH8. You'd remove the 2 light fixtures on the right side, but maintain the 2 on the left side of that south elevation, number 2 on RH8.
Well, I was just saying that I'm not sure light fixtures are the best design solution on the right-hand side, but really I don't want to get into that. They've come to
Yeah.
us asking to remove the fixture, so our option is to approve that or not.
Correct.
We don't want to open up the whole building again to a reapproval. It's already been approved the way it is. So that's a given. So I'm inclined just to think keep the fixtures. It's better having them than not having them, I believe.
Okay, so basically the board would be in consensus if we said remove all the light fixtures from RH6, which is the north elevation, but maintain the rest of them.
Well, give them the option to remove them. Yeah.
Okay, of course.
So before we well, let's make a motion and then we can ask the applicant to, just curious to make sure that we're working together with you guys. Do you have any, would you like to address the consensus we're reaching? It looks like we're going to suggest that you need to keep the greenery. You have to keep the bulk of the light fixtures or come back with a different design element that affects the same thing. And a different change, a different color for the contrasting metal to get greater contrast. Do you have any issues with those?
Yeah, so we are understanding of the greenery. I think that makes sense for the bulk of the building and the new color. In terms of the light fixtures, whatever we land on, we would do a symmetrical layout. So if we're doing something on the south side, we would repeat it on the north side. So we wouldn't come back with anything that would omit something on the north if we had to provide it on the south. The metal is really a complementary finish and custom finish to the plaster. I think looking at a building that's in progress without landscaping and furniture and decor within the building, it probably stands out a little bit, but it's really supposed to enhance the plaster and blend in and not be as contrasting as previously developed.
I guess my question is more, have you already purchased all these things on that color, or is it possible to make this change without undue difficulty?
We have purchased the paint for the color for the large mock-ups that we've been doing.
For the mock-ups, but has the entire building been built already to this new color?
It's in process.
Process, okay, because, okay, thank you. Who wants to make a motion here? Okay, I move that we recommend approval of this project with the following conditions. One, that the existing greenery from the previous design be retained. 2, that the light fixtures be retained, although they may modify the design style, not the scale or element. And 3, that the color of the metal be changed to be of higher contrast and not come back to a subcommittee for approval.
I'd like to make a friendly amendment, or do we need a second first?
We need a
sorry.
second first.
I will second.
Can I apologize for interrupting. Can I catch the last item you had mentioned?
The last item is to modify the color of the metal trim around the window, the champagne color, to provide greater contrast. And that come back to a subcommittee, to an ad hoc committee for review and approval.
The door trim, does that, the canopy as well?
Yes, very much the canopy as well.
Door trim and canopy.
Trim and canopy, yeah. And Board Member Rosenberg, are you seconding that motion?
Yes, I will second that motion.
Okay, and then what amendment would you like to make?
A friendly amendment to the green walls. I don't think that they need to maintain the vertical ones. I think we're really concerned with these top 2 on the upper level, because there had been some discussions, they were moving these vertical elements of green wall as well. And I didn't hear anyone on the board mention that those were of critical importance. So I think we'll really want to make sure that we're clarifying. It's on sheet RH7, the top 2 level left and right.
That's acceptable, sure. It's the green elements on the upper levels.
Yes.
That's what our intention is, yeah.
Appreciate that.
Okay, any further discussion on this? If not, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Can I just ask, sorry, before we take a roll call, you mentioned the light fixtures be maintained. I think you said something about, but they may provide a revised style. If you look, I have, let me get it a little bit larger for you guys. Just want to make sure that this motion is consistent with what you were.
Revised of a similar scale.
Yeah.
And why don't you say, and they may eliminate the ones on the, is it the north elevation? They have the option.
Sorry, north elevation?
Is it the north?
Was that RH6 you said?
Confirming that in 1 second. Confirm to that.
Okay, so those changes are okay with you?
Yeah, so
Second.
we're, just to clarification, we're saying all of the sconce fixtures should be retained. Is that right?
On 3 elevations, they should be retained.
Not on the north?
We're giving them the option on the north.
It sounds like they may not take that option, but we'd like to allow that exists.
Just looking for consensus here.
I think my preference would be that if we're going to put it on 3, we should put it on the 4th one. as
I
well.
think the applicant made the same statement. Would you prefer that we just keep, can you live, Kendra, with removing that sentence? Then?
That's fine with me.
Board
Give them
Member
the
Chen.
option.
Okay, could you please remove
Yep.
that? Thank you, Claire, you're a step ahead of us. Okay, could we please have a roll call vote now?
Board Member Chen,
Yes.
Board Member Hirsch,
Yes,
Vice Chair Rosenberg,
Yes.
Chair Balte,
Yes,
motion carries 4-0.
thank you very much. Okay, let's take a break.
Sign ad hoc.
Oh, the ad hoc committee. Yes, we need to assign a committee for the color. So I'll assign board members Chen and board member Rosenberg will be the ad hoc committee for this one, please. Okay, we'll take a break until 10:15, please. Okay, we are back in session, everyone. Next item is a public hearing quasi judicial for 420 Acacia. Request for a streamlined housing development review to allow the construction of an approximately 35,354 square feet multifamily project consisting of 16 2- and 3-bedroom condominium units in a 4 2- and 3-story buildings on an approximately 0.8 acre site. The project would replace a paved 68 space surface parking lot. The project includes 2 units provided at below market rate and accordingly requests concessions and waivers pursuant to state density bonus law. A compliant Senate bill pre-application was submitted on January 4th, 2023. Therefore, this project is being processed in accordance with SB 330. Environmental, okay, so before we get started, do we have any disclosures to make? Board Member Hirsch?
No.
No disclosures. Board Member Rosenberg?
Visited the site.
I disclosed that I visited the site.
I disclose I visited the site as well.
Board Member Adcock?
I did go to the site as well. Thank you.
Good morning, board members. Claire Raybold, Senior Planner. And as you noted, the project before you today is 420 Acacia Avenue. It is the city's first streamlined housing development review project. Project is generally located in the North Ventura Coordinated Area Plan future planning area. And the land use is fairly unique. There's a split zoning and split land use on the site. So the majority of the site is zoned RM 30 and multifamily residential. And then a small portion you can see at the rear in white is zoned R1 single family residential, and the land uses align with that. So the RM30 zoned area also has a multifamily land use designation, whereas that rear portion of the property has a single family land use designation. The project proposes to construct 16 unit multifamily with 2 units affordable to median income on a 0.8 acre parcel. Surrounding uses include single family along Olive Avenue at the rear, non-residential uses such as office and gym on Acacia, across Acacia, and an approved 29 unit multifamily affordable housing project adjacent the site along El Camino and Acacia. And the existing cannery building, 200 to 404 Portage, sits to the east of the site at the end of Acacia. The project is proposing to utilize state density bonus. They're eligible for 1 concession, which they are planning to use for the landscaping of rooftop open space, as well as unlimited waivers, which are proposed to be used for height, floor area, lot coverage, front setback, private street width, finished floor height, and for the daylight plane from the fixtures on the rooftop open space. And this is detailed, the exact amounts are detailed in the staff report. So key considerations, the project is a housing development project in accordance with the Housing Accountability Act. It is also subject to Senate Bill 330. As you noted, they submitted a compliant Senate Bill 330 pre-application in January of this year, which effectively freezes the development standards. This was after the objective standards were adopted, and so the project is complying with the objective standards. It is subject to the streamlined housing development review. So what the code says in terms of streamlined housing development review is that the ARB should be looking at the project and looking at opportunities for minor improvements for better consistency with the objective standards. And so To address that, staff indicated in the staff report some areas where we think there could be some improvements for better consistency of the objective standards, but open to hearing the ARB's thoughts on this as well. And today we're asking you to conduct a study session to provide feedback on whether minor adjustments to the application was result in better adherence to the contextual design criteria or objective design standards contained in Chapter 1824, consistent with the streamlined review pursuant to the new code section 1877-073 for housing development projects. And just wanted to also note that in terms of next steps, so following the ARB's review, the staff would look for hopefully some revisions to the plans to address some of the concerns raised by the ARB, and then issue a decision on the project. Following that, the applicant also has a vesting tentative map on file because these are for sale units. And so that vesting tentative map will follow and go to the Planning Commission and Council for review and decision. And with that, I'll turn it back to you and recommend that you hear from the applicant as well.
Thank you. Before we do that, we have an opportunity for questions of the staff. Do we have any questions? Go ahead, Board Member Hirsch.
Yes, at one point we were working on a objective standards for townhomes. What could I request explanation for why this is not reviewed relative to townhome standards?
So we were looking at potential changes to the code, but we can't apply things that are in our code right now.
Mhm.
So.
So, I mean, therefore, you've applied the general objective standards that we had prior to looking at townhomes. Maybe you could explain,
Yes.
would we hope to insert townhomes when they became official?
At the time that we approved the objective design standards, we had already heard the townhouse question and had our consulting architect look at the design standards to see if a townhouse project could fit within those standards, and the answer was yes. And so we feel like the current standards can be applicable to townhouses. Could they be refined? Of course, but they can be applied to townhouses as they are right now.
Doesn't 100% answer my question, right? Because if you look at the detail of this project, you see conflicts with, and you're pointing out that there are conflicts, so that we should begin to become aware of them. And in fact, it seems to me that that was really what we were hoping to do with objective standards, is to see how they apply and revise them as we see that they don't work anymore or they're not appropriate.
Right. So we started the process, as you noted, for looking at things we might want to revise in the code. And this is the very first project using these objective standards.
Yes.
And so I think we're hoping that, to highlight through this process things that we think, we might want to change in the code to be more refined, as maybe an alternative to townhomes and or just generally applying to projects. But as of today, right now, we have to apply the standards that were in the code as of January 4th, 2023.
Got it. Okay. Thanks. For the moment, I don't have any other questions.
Any other questions? Board Member
Yeah.
Shan, go ahead.
Yeah, I do have. Could you please clarify the required setback or any like buildable area for this project? Because on sheet 8.6, there are some red dash lines, black dash lines, and there is line called the R1, RM30 zoning designation boundary. So what is the limitation, the restriction to the buildable area?
Yeah, so we speak a little bit to it in the staff report, but I'll clarify a little bit more. So this project is, as I said, very unique because it does have this split land use designation. And specifically in the R1 land use designation, they are only allowed to do single-family residential. And so how they've designed the project is to stay within the land use designation and the zoning for that multifamily residential use. Now, that also kind of aligned with, it's actually a greater setback than is otherwise required, I believe. But it aligned because it also, there was also a daylight plane that had to be maintained. And so in doing that, they also aligned with the single family residential daylight plane requirements. So does that
Okay, thank you.
answer?
Board Member Adcock.
Thank you for the presentation. I do have one question. This is on page 54 of the document. There's a note about the concession for the landscaping, that for concessions, developers must provide documentation supporting the cost reduction achieved through the concession. Was that provided?
Yes, I do have that. Hold on one second. My thing has, yeah, it like disappeared there. I don't know what just happened. Okay. Give me just one moment. Sorry. What was the question? It was the cost reduction achieved through the landscaping. Sorry, I'm trying to find it right now, but we do have that. If we. Yeah, something.
Any other
Sorry,
questions?
if we could move on and I'll come back.
Any other
That's fine.
questions?
We can move on.
Okay, Board Member Hirsch, you had a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on Commissioner Chen's comment, really. Is there any possibility within the zoning to do some spot zoning revisions? Because doesn't it seem odd here that we have two zones, and wouldn't it simplify this project so incredibly if it were possible to spot zone something here to make it very consistent instead of having these two different zones?
If they rezone the site, they're not eligible for any of the streamlining that they're proposing. So they are choosing not to rezone. You can't use state density bonus and SB 330 if you're rezoning a property, so.
What a shame.
I do have one other question.
Go ahead, Board Member Adcock.
Thank you. This is on page 63 of the report. There's a highlighted section 12, treatment of buried archaeological. Was that intentionally in the report?
Sorry, say that one more
It's
time.
on page 63. There's a highlighted section. That's it.
Yes, so I'm sorry, I should have also noted, there was a at places memorandum for this project. And there was a accidental draft version of a conditions of approval that I was working from that had some other standard conditions that weren't relevant. And so I apologize, it ended up in the packet, but we've updated with the corrected conditions of approval for this project that are being proposed. Did we get copies of this to everybody? Veronica?
I'd like to ask a question regarding the objective design standard checklist. It's item B1, treatment of corner buildings less than 40 feet in height. And the standard requires corner buildings less than 40 feet in height and the end unit of townhouses, et cetera. It says in the checklist that this does not apply. Why does this not apply to the end unit of the townhomes?
Can you remind me what page you're on?
It's packet page 76. Checklist item B1.
Oh, because it's not on a corner.
Okay,
Yeah.
we were part of doing this. It was either a corner building or the end unit of a townhouse. It's very unlikely you'd put the end unit of a townhouse
But it's
on a
under
corner.
treatment of building corners on corner lots. It's
Well,
under
I'm
that.
telling you, the
subheading.
intention is for end unit
Okay.
of townhomes to be, this to apply to that.
Okay,
So
Okay.
that's my opinion anyway.
okay.
If that is the case, then these things would need to apply. Is that correct?
Sorry, what was your last question?
So if it is the case, then the end units would need to have these design standards, and the height to width ratio is the one that jumps at me. Because that's potentially a conflict on units that are required to be low at the same time. So I'll bring that to my colleagues' attention that there's potentially an issue with our standards here.
Yeah, again, this is packet page 76, the first item under 18.24.040 B1, treatment of corner buildings. It's not a corner lot, it's corner buildings. Corner buildings less than 40 feet in height and end units of townhomes or other attached housing products that face the street shall include all of the following features on their secondary building frontage. Question for staff is, these items in the applicant's justification, are these just the applicant writes this in and you just straight print it, or do you sort of review these
No,
comments as
these
well?
were written in by me.
Okay, excellent.
Based on my review.
Yeah, I also noticed, again, sorry to jump around a little bit, but earlier they're saying that the applicant states that this requirement is not objective, but subjective. And I'm a little irked by that because we have these objective standards, they are objective standards. So it's interesting that the applicant is fighting whether or not an item on the objective standards list is actually objective. That's
Yeah,
not for the application to review. That's for the board and the city staff to determine, and they either need to adhere or not adhere. So, sorry, that was more of a comment than a question.
Yes, but that's exactly why we're here is
Yeah.
to make these sorts of determinations. And I just wanted to read the code language because the checklist is sort of an abbreviated version. And so if we read the code, this is for B1
Mhm.
being the treatment of corner buildings less than 40 feet. That's the correct one, right?
I guess the question is it a corner building?
Well, let me read the rest of the text. It says corner buildings less than 40 feet in height and end units of townhouses or other attached housing products that face the street
Mhm.
shall include the following features on their secondary building frontage. So it does talk about facing a street. And so are we in that situation?
What are the heights of these buildings?
Yeah, they are just over 40 feet. I think it's 44 max, so, yeah.
Okay, so then that's the wrong code
Well,
section.
but wait a
No,
second.
well, I guess I originally read it as a corner building, thinking of it as a corner lot. And so
Well,
what
but I
they're saying is
just,
the intention was really for any corner building or on any corner building, including like the ends of townhomes, even if it's not on a corner. And so,
but
so they're arguing that the intention really is that it should apply to this project
is this building under or over 40 feet tall?
over.
Okay,
Well, no, building C is not though.
Sorry, building, yes, certain buildings are not.
That's the one where this would become an issue.
so the one in question
Oh, wait.
is how tall?
2 stories, 20 something feet.
Okay, because there are two different code sections, you know, depending if you're under or over 40 feet. If you're over 40 feet tall, it is not as clear that it applies to the end of townhouses.
So that's
So
just
this would
another
really, I think this is
another loophole in this code. then.
build,
40 feet is just the stair tower.
Right. Right. You're right.
This is a question session. Any other questions of staff. Did you respond? Board Member Adcock had a question earlier, which we were waiting for an answer on that.
I'm trying to find.
I'm sorry,
it.
we're keeping you
We've
busy
had a
at the
lot of
same time.
questions coming up.
This is bound to happen. There's use of the checklist. And this is questionable.
Well, and I appreciate this, but I do still actually, I'm not sure I'm fully satisfied on this one because of this zoning, right? So with building B, it's unit 5, and with building C, those guys have to be shorter because they abut the residential zone strip on the backside of this property, correct? That's the daylight plan that's being imposed on those two buildings?
There's several regulations requiring those to be lower.
There's a daylight plane on the R1. Yes, it's shown on the elevation
Right.
drawings.
And then sorry, again, we might not have an answer for this, but the follow-up question would be, building B has to be lower in that end unit, but because the rest of the building is over 40 feet, does it qualify as an over 40 feet building? Or because it's the end unit is under 40 feet? Right, do you see what I'm saying? Like the whole building's not 40 feet,
Mhm.
and this code specifically applies to the end units. So I just don't
So
know how
The
we would
code,
apply that.
we have to read the black and white code.
Yep.
And it says corner buildings less than 40 feet in height
Okay.
and N units of townhouses or other attached housing projects that face the street.
Yeah.
So are we
not
facing the street?
So
No, it
then
does not face the street in this
Okay,
case.
And
so
building
then
C
it
is on-
loses on that account.
it's that one?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Because it doesn't face the street.
Okay.
it would comply.
So
But I think-
it could be the end of townhouses, but it's not facing the street, so therefore not applicable
So
here.
to my colleagues and staff, that will become an issue because the intention is to make these things appear vertical. When a townhouse is 2 stories tall for whatever reason and has required parking in it, which is at least 20 feet wide, you have a conflict. It's very difficult to do.
Mhm.
Which really speaks to the comment Board Member Hirsch was driving towards. These objective standards were not designed with townhomes in mind. So we do need to get some sort of upgrade on these at some point to make it work for applicants. They're going crazy with this. Okay, but questions I think have been answered. Thank you very
Yeah, I
much.
can- One other.
I can,
But we're still waiting to get an
yeah.
answer to Board Member Adcock's
Yeah.
question, and I think we need to do
So
that first.
the cost estimate is $4,250 per home or $68,000 for the project as a whole. The pricing includes 2 planter boxes, 16-foot length by 24 inches, plant material drip system with timer, drain, and labor. I think there was also concerns with respect to long-term maintenance. I think the applicant maybe can speak a little bit better to this, but I think the issue is that the rooftop open space seems to be more designed toward a common area that all, members would use on like a rental building. But with townhomes, you're individually selling off. And so if you have landscaped areas with permanent, drip kind of system in there, there was kind of maintenance issues between HOA and individual landowners that they expressed concerns about as well, so.
Thank you. I have a question follow-up from Kendra's question. Is on that, the 40-foot height limit, it does appear to be a loophole. Has that been considered? Because they're already asking for a height increase from 35 to go to 44, but then applying the 40-foot, because the code reads 40 feet, then the waiver for the going over 35 feet is also getting them this other waiver.
That's a 2-for-1 discount.
Yes. Has that been considered?
Sorry, it's getting them which other waiver?
The building orientation and setbacks that we just talked about on page 76, 1824.40.
Yeah, I
Oh,
mean.
sorry, 040.
If it doesn't apply, it doesn't apply. It's not a waiver that they're requesting if the building is over 40 feet. But I get your point about what you're saying.
Thank you.
Anything else, Board Member Hirsch?
Yes, I'd like some clarity as to which drawings we should be looking at here. The normal site plans don't show any relationship of the street, the entry street, to the access to the garage. But there is a drawing on C3 that shows the, I believe it, it's a proposed condition, the access to the garage. So that has some impact upon the street being used kind of in both ways there at the end of the project. Which one is the appropriate way to look at this project?
I'm not sure I understand your question. Sorry, can you repeat that again?
Sure. If you look at drawing C3, there's a 340 Portage Avenue proposed condition. That's an access to the garage.
Oh, yes, okay.
So that's really not a private street, that's a public street then. It's used.
No,
to-
it's not public. It's private. So this is private property. There is a private shared easement between the two property owners.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right. So that in effect, the regular site plan here kind of leaves that out. The site plans that are up front on A6
Leaves out
But-
the easement.
leaves out the connection as a part of this roadway.
Sure, so the site plan on A6, it shows in a very
So-
light dashed line where that easement location is, and references it as access easement for adjoining property.
Okay.
But it does show the existing condition on that site. However, council recently approved that project. And
change.
so
Yeah.
the civil drawings are reflecting what is,
What
you know,
w-
what we
what really
expect
will
will
be.
be. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, folks, let's move this along. We have members of the public waiting to speak and an applicant. So next step is the applicant. Would you like to make a presentation, please? You'll have 10 minutes. If you could please state and spell your name for the record.
Sure. Good morning. My name's Josh Frotsos, Josh, V as in Victor, Rotsos. I'm with Dividend Homes. I just want to start by thanking Claire that, we submitted our application in January of this year and that we're already before the ARB. It's really a testament to the process. And as a real estate developer and a company and a home builder, timing is really important and we really appreciate that. So thanks, Claire. With me today is Rita Raj and Ron from the Dahling Group. They're our architect and land planner, and they're going to make a presentation. Additionally, remotely is BKF, our civil engineer, because there were some concerns about storm drainage that they're better equipped to answer. I just want to say how excited Dividend Homes is to build in the city of Palo Alto. We've been a private home builder since 1972. I've been with the company for 20 years. This is our first opportunity to build for sale housing in this great city. When Joe Head and Charities Housing came to us with this site, we jumped at the opportunity. And I think at first blush, it was a 0.8 acre surface parking lot that looked fairly straightforward. But when you kind of dig in on the details, being next to single family homes in between an affordable 5-story building, Sobratos on to the east, the gym on the other side, there's a lot of context you got to take in. And I think we've come forth with a great site plan working with staff. I don't want to steal any of Rita Raj's thunder. He's going to make a great presentation, but we look forward to your feedback and we can't wait to provide housing in the city of Palo Alto. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Josh. Name's Ritu Raj, RITU-RAJ-SHARMA. Sometimes it helps to have a long name, takes up your time. I just wanted to add as in Claire and me have been going through these objective standards, trying every time we redesign a building, does it meet, right? It's not like, the way we have to look at it from our side is if you meet a certain condition, then you have to follow a certain set of conditions. It's not a 2-for-1. If you get to this, then you have to follow this. And it's kind of, I guess, the good and the bad thing about objective standards, right? It sets the path forward, but sometimes it also limits you to what you can do. So next slide, please. Yeah, as I said, this was an interesting site. We RM zoning, and suddenly there was a tiny strip of R1 zoning, but like all infill sites, it's a challenge. It's how you solve the problem. Next slides, please. I don't think I need to blare much on the context. I guess everyone of you saw what was there on the site. Charities is building the 5-story housing. Subrato's got the big garage and the other projects around us. And I would say, as in building 16 townhomes, 2 of them below market rate in what's an existing parking lot is actually a great addition to the city. I'd just leave it at that from the context. But for the context, it's also kind of interesting for us because, next slide, please. Yeah, it's kind of a very small site, but you also have very, I guess, distinct edges. We had the single family on the rear side along the R1 zone, which are much more established neighborhoods. Not the potential, but the proposed 5-story building along, El Camino, which kind of fronts on one side. And then we had the access easement, and somehow also kind of trying to buffer against that, and also kind of the frontage along Acacia, which is a slightly much more industrial, character. Next slide, please. So when you kind of looked at the site, what you kind of see is kind of more of a guiding principles, how we approach the site. We looked at the rear side, where it was the R1 zoning. It had its completely different set of zoning. I know some of you are talking about spot zoning, but we had to play with the rules that were there. So it's like there was that R1 zoning. So we kind of felt it was really important, whether we kind of asked for waivers or not, but to respect the privacy and kind of respect stepping it down. But we also had the 5-story proposed housing on one side, right? So you're kind of balancing from an existing 1, 2-story neighborhood on the back and a 5-story proposed unit on the side. And also kind of orienting ourselves towards the public side of the street and how you address the street. And then the easement on the side. Next slide, please. So what we kind of came up with was we kind of stayed out of the R1 zone. I think it also creates a great buffer against the neighborhood. So it kind of creates a like for like, a backyard to a backyard open space scenario and push the units back. With the 2-story units, we ended up with 2-story units along the back side towards the existing neighborhood. We also limited the open space for the 2-story units. The 2-story units purposely do not have roof deck, so that kind of keeps the open space on the ground floor, and it creates a sense of privacy, so nobody's overlooking on the other side towards the single-family neighborhood. The units are either fronting onto Acacia or side turn. Having the 2 side turn units next to the 5-story building, the 2 buildings, it also, from when you look at it from the single family side, you kind of see the shallower side of the building. So you're not looking at a large 3-story mass when they look back from the backyard. So it kind of helps it oriented them better way. And we kind of, like we talked about, kept the access easement next to and worked around it to work collaboratively between our project and their project. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is the proposed site plan. As you can see, it's a little more detailed and but it follows the guiding principles, the open spaces to the backside, the rear, kind of provide a buffer, but also kind of creates a kind of a like for like situation. The units step back from the 2-story edge in the back towards a more 3- and 4-story. With the roof deck, it does become a 4-story building, and the buildings are oriented towards the street, either with kind of units directly facing the street or to maybe wrapping around the porches and the paseos opening onto the street. Next, please. So it's a variety of unit types. We've got the 2- and 3-story unit types. We also have got some units with tandem garages, some with 2-car side-by-side garages. And it's 2 units provided on site, a mix of tandem and 2-car garages. Range of unit sizes from 1,400 to 2,100, and maybe 2- and 3-bedroom mixes between the units. I know you have the whole package, just kind of a simple explanation of kind of the design. It is a much more, it's not a quote unquote, more traditional design. I think this one fits well in the context, especially of where it's located and what's being proposed around it. So it's a much more square shouldered, roof decks, cleaner materials, articulation through massing and, step backs and all that, and changes in material, then kind of adding just things on the elevation. As you can see, is in the step back I just highlighted, that's kind of where the 2-story edges interact next to the single family neighborhood. So it kind of creates that buffer, but it also kind of was, I think, a very nice way to deal with the elevation change and the daylight planes. It kind of creates a mass when you look back from the single family side. Next, please. Materials and colors, I think it kind of blends well with kind of what's being proposed around in the neighborhood and also in kind of in the context. I think it also blends well with the proposed architectural style. We can kind of get into more details if you have detailed questions about, more specific questions about materials and finishes. That's it. Next. These are two views. The first one is looking back towards the project. You can see the 2-story buildings on the back and the 4 stories with the roof deck, I guess, technically fronting on Acacia. And the other one is looking at it more or less like what would be the charities project next door, kind of looking back towards the project. So as you can see, and we've got front doors that address the street, the openings of paseos that kind of highlight it, minimizing you can't see much of garages or anything at all on the street. So it can really kind of creates a much more pedestrian friendly streetscape, both with, front doors and kind of limiting the garages in the front. Next, please. So overall, I think this would be a great addition to Palo Alto. We've got the 5-story building coming next door. In a small parking lot, we're kind of getting 16 units, 2 of them. It's a mixed income neighborhood. So like you've got inclusionary housing built within the site. So I think it'd be a great addition. To take any questions. So thank you for taking this. And again, thanks all to the staff for getting us through this process. It's been a learning exercise through the objective standards too. So yes. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Let's open this hearing to
Questions?
we have a member of the public who's been waiting all morning.
Oh, yeah.
Why
Okay.
don't we open it? Yeah. Okay, any questions of the applicant? Questions of the board member Adcock? Go ahead.
I can go first. Thank you, Board Member Balte. And thank you for your presentation. I have some minor questions. I will have more later, but the one, should I start right with material question? I do have some material questions. Let me start with that. Like on the, I forget what sheet it's on your renderings, you show a screen between units. But I did not see that in the material board or any description. What is that material intended to be?
We haven't decided on that. Most likely that's going to be more of a homeowner. If it's not going to be a permanent screen, so it kind of more depends on if the homeowner would want a privacy screen or not to it, because we do have the roof decks at the upper level, right? So it's not an actually built screen, as like it's just a rendering. On that one, we're not showing a fixed screen.
I mean, between the units, the screens would not be fixed?
No, it's like the homeowner could put something, but like we have parapets 3 feet high. That's kind of like what's we built with the units. So.
But between the units, you're showing a screen, looking at page A13.
Yeah, we haven't decided on the actual screen material.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then I have a follow-up question. If it's up to the homeowner to put that up, doesn't that, when you typically buy a townhouse, you don't build anything of your own right on the, you're between your property and the next property?
Yeah, I think we haven't decided on kind of whether there'll be a screen or not. Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
And another, a small detail question. This is for sorry, may I ask another question?
Please continue. Yes,
Thank
yes,
you.
absolutely.
Between, I think it's building A and B, on the end unit, the 2-story, that the change to the darker siding from the stucco below is a little bit higher than the rest of the units. And I think that is intentional based on your request for a height waiver. I'm asking, is that intentional? And if so, how do you plan to detail that joint between the 2 materials?
Which elevation are you looking at, board member Adcock?
It's on sheet A13. If you look at where the note D is on the left building,
Thank you.
where that dark gray siding goes a tiny bit higher. And when you look at that on elevation on sheet, was it? A8 that also shows that difference, which looks intentional, but that creates a tricky detailing between the units. And there's a vertical white line, which I also can't tell what that's intended to be.
On E7, which elevation is it on? Sorry.
I think she's referencing building A west elevation rear, that white line. Is that what you're referencing?
No, building, it's both in A and B, but let's go to building B on sheet A8 on the south elevation. The leftmost unit, Claire, if you could share your screen, it might be
I don't
easier to.
have it up. Hold on.
Or the overhanging.
Sorry, Board Member Adcock, just for clarification, we're looking at sheet A8, Building B, south elevation. Are you discussing the shortest of the townhomes? And
Yes.
how that dark gray, the underside of the dark gray is slightly taller than the underside of the next unit over?
Yes.
Got it.
And
Thank you.
between the next unit over and that end unit, there's a vertical white line that looks like a gap between buildings. I'm not quite sure what's intended there.
Thank you.
This is, my name is Ron Carriaga, RONCARIAGA. Actually, those two units are, there's no gap in between those two units.
Okay, so what is that white line?
There's an air gap, which will be covered by material, but there's no, you cannot see any gap when you're standing out.
And is the end unit being higher in that soffit, is that intentional?
Oh, we have a higher plate height on the two-story unit on the first floor, which is 10 feet
Okay,
on the first floor. So it's 9/10 on the two-story units, but for the three-story unit, it's 9, 9, and 9. Yeah.
thank you. Can I wrap up my other material
Keep going,
questions?
keep going.
Thank you.
Nobody's gonna stop you.
So on, related to all of that, I think it's on your sheet A31. On your left section, you have that soffit, which is similar in all of, variety of your units. First question is, what is that material supposed to be on the soffit? And the second question is on your outside corner panel detail on the upper left, detail 9. It shows like a wood trim wrapping the corners, which is not shown on your renderings. Which one is correct?
Regarding the software, you're talking about the section A. It will be a shiplap. Soffit will be shiplap, and on the outside corner, we'll revise that detail. We'll put a metal trim instead, so that 2x trims will not be showing. Yeah, for a cleaner look.
Thank you. Yeah, rendering looks cleaner than the detail. Thank you.
Good questions indeed. Anything else from the board for questions for the applicants?
Yeah.
Member Hirsch, go ahead.
Could you describe the actual door-to-door garage locations from door to door in opposing units, A and B, or let's see, D and C and D? What is the actual width of this driveway? It seems to have been questioned a lot in the, what is it door to door to the garage door to garage door? I think it's been described as only 22 feet, but I think,
I think the 22 feet is the drivable surface. Garage,
right.
then we've got, I think if I'm not mistaken, at a 4-foot aprons on either side. So it would be, I think it was either 30 feet or 31. I mean, let me confirm it with the civil drawing, but
I can help you out. It's on your C3 sheet. So you have the 22-foot driveway plus 4 foot on either
yes.
side from the
So
driveway.
the 22 is the drivable surface.
Plus
Then you have
4.
the apron which would kind of have a little bit of landscaping, and in front of the garage doors, you'd have the driveway. So,
Okay.
so it's 22
Because I
plus
think
4 plus
there were
4.
some questions about the 22 feet, but that isn't the questions that would be raised, I think that were raised by planning, have to do with the street width itself versus the door-to-door garage.
Yeah, the door-to-door is slightly different than what we consider to be the street width, which is also for the purposes of calculating like the total floor area, because we do reduce the street width, which doesn't include the aprons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Okay. I mean, I was concerned about parking issues, and almost more than the zoning issue question. So it's important that it's a bigger dimension there for that. I have some detailed questions as well about certain details. So for example, on building A, south elevation along the Paseo, the canopy that you have there, I give you some flexibility regarding some of the detailing because I don't think you're really kind of finished with this yet. And so there are things yet to come. But does that canopy extend out of the line of the building? Does it go around the corner on the two-story element there, that corner? Generally speaking, the canopies seem to turn the corner.
It extends, if you go to page A13, it extends out about a couple feet and it wraps around the corner, but shorter. It's extend out shorter, about 6 inches.
Okay, so this seems to cut it off in line with the end of the building there. So it needs coordination there. That's the only issue. Now, can you explain on the rooftop why you're showing some of the projections above the roof line in white and then others in a dark material? Why the ones that are, what is the difference between them? Why are the projections above the roof line? Same building A, south elevation on A7.
I think that was more of a little bit of I think our interpretation of not having it the same color. If I'm understanding correctly, you're talking about building a south, as an example, it's the stair towers coming up.
Stair towers.
Yeah, that are different colors. I think we just maybe did not want everything to be white. I think it was more of a.
Yes. Okay, fine.
Sorry.
There were some sky exposure plane issues regarding those towers planning. Is that, any issue as to the daylight plane in the towers?
Yeah, so the applicant is requesting a waiver. So under the rooftop open space requirements, there's a 45-degree angle from the edge of the bottom of the rooftop open space moving inward. And so the applicant is requesting a waiver from that 45-degree angle for the guardrail / parapet and I think a couple of the stairwells do encroach. They did centralize the stairwells primarily, but there were a couple of stairwells that do encroach on that 45-degree angle.
Okay, so it's one of those exceptions that's being looked for. Yeah. I'm just trying to understand some of the elevations where it's a question as to whether the smaller building aligns with the larger building alignment in general. So for example, well, let's just take building B on A8. Is it a proportional issue, or what is the reason why you have a window on one side and you don't align a roof line with the adjacent material? there's a break at that point, you know. So if you have a solid color, you know, a band of material, then it comes out and meets the lower roof line, it doesn't line up. Is that intentional?
Yeah, if you think it's the same three and question, I think if that was intentional, it's also like Ron said, we are looking at different slope rates. So some ways I think you could take it all.
Could you speak into the,
Sorry. I think we also felt it would kind of break the mass of the 2 and this 3-story a little bit more if it was all one, one color. I think it kind of just might feel a much more longer building and kind of defeat the purpose of having a break. So it's kind of the change in color and the massing. I think if you're talking about the end unit, the darker shade not aligning with the
Mhm.
lighter color material of the 3-story building, right? If I'm correct.
Mhm. Okay. So, you know, I'm noticing in building B on A8, on the smaller building, once again, you know, the canopy doesn't extend out beyond the line of the face of the lower section there. The brown section. So, okay, maybe we have a talk about those when we talk about details anyhow of the face of the building. Let me see if I have any other thoughts. I don't understand what is going on in the building D elevation. There's 2 kind of vertical stripes in the middle, or well, one of them is part of a larger piece of the white area there, and then you have a piece to the left. Can you explain that a little bit?
On which elevation?
Building D east elevation.
Are you talking about the gray?
Yeah, the gray and white together there.
Yeah.
Those are accent panels?
I think you're just looking at a way to break the massing through maybe through color. I'm like, so it doesn't kind of feel like a solid one. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll stop and wait. More.
Thank you, David. Yes. I would very much like to let the public speak now on this, if we could. So if we could please sit down. Oh, I'm sorry. Board Member Chen has a question you haven't spoken up yet. So go ahead. One more question.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so I have a couple of questions regarding the site plan. So how will you solve the guest parking for this project?
City does not have a guest parking ratio for multifamily.
Into the micro. Please speak into the microphone.
Sorry, the city does not have a guest parking ratio for multifamily standards.
Okay, but in reality, have you ever thought about it? Like when guests come in, visit?
There is on-street parking on Acacia. It's only, the furthest building would be maybe 5 units down.
Okay. Okay, and on sheet 8.34, the pedestrian circulation sheet. So for building A, how do they access to the trash enclosure? Do they go all the way between B and D and then go all the way around and then access to the trash enclosure, or how?
You're talking about, the last unit can go through their backyard. Because they have the side yard, which is, but other ones, we expect them to go through the alley side of it.
I'm sorry.
From the alley side of it, most likely folks would still maybe have cans in their garages. So we kind of assume that, they'll be coming out of the garages and going. Most likely, but the other process, the safer route would be as they could use the paseos too.
Okay, so for the rest of the building A, they will just go between the drive aisle, right? Between A and B, building A and B?
Or they could use the paseo between
Right.
building.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
And so for the walkway that behind the building C, the pedestrian walkway, is it just for the right side unit of building C only, or is there any other use for that?
No, it's just for the units. I mean, in one of our previous, there's also meter closets on the north side of the building, as you see on the sheet, as in for the two-story building. So in some ways, like the utility folks would also be using it. So, but we kind of had concerns about from staff of utilizing the quote unquote, the shared walkway and somebody walking through in case if there were cars coming out from the garage next door. So I think that was why the pedestrian route that was routed through the top end of the project. Yeah, it's just for the end unit, but so.
Okay. And one more question about the trash enclosure roof slope, because you're showing a sloped roof for the trash enclosure, but it seems like that is the only sloped roof for the entire project. So could you please explain the design intent of that?
Yeah, I mean, we could look into it. It does require it to be covered. It also needs to be, there's always also like life safety, fire issues and all that stuff, non-combustible materials and all that stuff. So I think that's kind of where we came up with, I think, the slope roof and the trash enclosure. It's also kind of pretty low, so and kind of at the backside. So we did not feel that it would be an issue.
If I could also note, there is a daylight plane requirement for accessory structures. So I think it's also coming from that. They have to have a certain height of the structure, but it also has to meet a daylight plane. So.
Okay, thank you. That's all my question.
Good questions. Okay,
I have another one too. Sorry, but
okay, one last question.
yeah, under the bonus laws allow waivers. I don't understand what is the reason for the finished floor height 2 feet versus 2 feet 8. Where is that? What is that all about?
As per the objective standards, if we had to be more or less on grade with the sidewalk, our buildings would have to be 2 feet 8, 28 feet. There's a floating scale as to how close your building has to be and how high it has to be raised up from. It's basically like creating stoops. So it's like, if we kind of had to raise our building that high as to where it's located, then we'd need steps both in front of the house and from the garages to get to the house because the streets would be at one level. So that's why we're asking for the waiver. It is either we'd have to push all the units back, which we're already limited, as you saw with the R1 zoning. We don't have much flexibility, right? So it was either, there's not much way to shrink the units too, because when we have garages and tandem garages, you're limited by 10 by 20, parking standards. So so that's why we're asking for the waiver, because the objective standard has a floating, depending on how close you are to the public sidewalk, your entries have to be raised up.
Okay, understood. So that's a bit of a conflict. Yep.
If you were
Okay, done.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's open this meeting to public comment. Do we have any members of the public who would wish to address us on this issue?
Yes, just one speaker card from Eugen Lockhart.
Thank you for your patience. If you could please state and spell your name for the record.
Yep, my name's Eugen Lockhart, Y-U-G-E-N, last name L-O-C-K-H-A-R-T. And I'm Olive Avenue resident. All but 2 of the houses are basically mine. And we have actually spoken with Josh Vitros about this project. And we generally actually quite approve of it. It seems like a pretty reasonable addition to our neighborhood. So in general, we're good to go. Just nitpicks, we've talked to them about the garage enclosure. We don't love it being in the backyard of one of the houses.
You mean the trash enclosure?
The trash, sorry. And if it's gonna stay there, if we could insist on having rubber gaskets and soft close hinges on all the metal doors so that we don't get banging and clashing. No matter what you do, these things are always accessed a lot, and it just creates an audible nuisance for everybody. If it could be moved, that would be wonderful. Another detail is we really appreciate that the building C and it's stepped down so that we're not getting just a giant looming thing behind us. Although there is a big gray wall on the third level from second to the third, and maybe we could ask for maybe some wood type features to break those edges so it's not so hard edge. Actually quite appreciate that it's such a non-standard situation between acacia being very industrial, matching with the charities building and project facing a giant brick building on the opposing side of the street. So the square look is appropriate on the acacia side, but having a more residential feeling on the back side facing olive would be appreciated as well, just to kind of help tie it into a more residential feel. As I was listening to the public or their comments about the rooftop access, I think those are quite cute actually. One note is it does get pretty hot in the afternoon in this area. You might actually add some horizontal trellises of some sort for them so that as you're sitting on your rooftop deck, you're not just getting beaten by the sun. So it might actually be a nice add-on for that. Even if it's a little higher, being such a non-standard facing on acacia, I don't think it's really going to hurt anything to add a little bit more. Trying to see what else. I know I'm forgetting something. The drainage, just, I know you guys are looking at the drainage, just make sure that you accommodating that really is a lot of flooding that's potential back there. So make sure it's highly addressed and including the runoff from all of our backyards, which slope backwards into your area. So just make sure you keep track of that too. So I guess I'm out of time. Thank you very much for all of your help.
Thank you for your comments. Do we have any other speakers?
No, just the one.
Thank you. Okay, we'll close the hearing to public comment and bring it back to the board for discussion. Board Member Adcock, why don't you start us off?
So regarding the pathway to the trash that you brought up, I'm unclear whether the residents would have city trash cans in their garage, or are they taking their bagged trash to the trash enclosure, which kind of determines whether somebody's rolling their trash bins from the garage or walking their bag of trash out from their front door.
Is that a question for the applicant then, or is that I think they've made
I
it
think
clear
it's-
that the trash bins all belong in that trash enclosure.
But in response to Board Member Ten's question, it was responded that the trash would come out of the garage. So if somebody's is that bins in their garage, or?
They have to take it to the common enclosure. There's no trash bins in their garage.
Okay.
There were iterations that this went through. Basically, there were too many bins that would have been required along their frontage such that they couldn't fit it along the frontage. And so we required that they have the trash enclosure, and then that trash enclosure maintenance, they're going to have to bring it out to the street. So they're going to have a maintenance HOA requirement that brings it out to the street so that there's 3 total bins that come out to the street for service.
Okay, thank you. Because in that case, if I'm living in Unit 4 of Building A, then I'm either opening my garage door to take my trash to the trash enclosure or walking all the way around from my front door.
Yeah. So you could open your garage door and take it to there.
But the assumption, I'm sorry to jump in, the assumption is that residents won't have their own trash bin in their own garage.
They will not.
So every time the kitchen wastebasket is full, you're walking across the whole site to empty it in the big bins.
Correct.
Okay, Board Member Adcock, why don't you finish your comments? I think there will be more comments about this subject as we go forward.
Yeah, I have more questions from that. So similarly, the path to the trash slash, yeah, even the common area in the back for building C, it's the little pathway that's between their common, not common, their private outdoor space behind the neighbors in the back. That pathway kind of feels like it could be a narrow alley, which I think as of others might have similar concerns about just having a narrow pathway between the townhouse units and the R1 houses in the back. So something we should discuss. I will hold my other questions for others to chime in.
No other comments of other items? Usually we sort of, everybody lays out the issues you might have and we can all respond. You're welcome to speak later too if you prefer them.
I will just go through my other comments then.
Why don't you just go ahead and do that?
Yeah, so building A, I think this was brought up earlier to the stepping back of the unit from north to south. So you have a 3-foot difference between the first floor plan width and the second floor plan width goes from 28 feet to 25 feet. What happens in that little ledge? Because I'm concerned about waterproofing, detailing, all of that, which is really your problem, but you're creating a 3-foot little roof segment in that area. Have you considered that?
So we're not trying to ask questions of the applicant.
Okay.
now, but just what your opinion is. So what I'm hearing you say is you think that's not a great
That's
design idea.
I see that as a potential problem for the resident.
So your job is to convince the rest of us to agree so we can all collectively do something
Sounds
about it. So keep that in mind.
All right, thank you. Another comment is just from the 4 units that have 4 or 5, I think 4 units that have private areas, outdoor spaces on the first floor. I think just back to the question of pathways and such, whether each one has a gate out of their private areas or not. Some units seem to show a gate, some don't. That's one comment. And the other comment is really about what I had asked earlier about the fencing between the units, given that I understand these units to be sold to residents, that privacy between units is of concern in townhouses. So when you go to the roof deck, I would think that you would want to have a substantial height barrier between the 2 units so that you would, that would be a fixed element. So that's something, that's my last comment.
Next, Board Member Chen.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for your presentation. And I do agree with what my colleague just mentioned. I do have some concerns, same concerns about the trash disclosure, trash disposal, how they circulate to dispose their trash. So maybe they need to work out a better resolution and a better solution. So actually I have a question to the staff. So when David and I doing those townhome research, I remember for some of the projects like the Alma Village, they have like the different paver or different colors painted along the driveway as the pedestrian path. So is it something allowable or is it something meet the code?
It's allowed, not required.
Okay.
And I would say that I don't know that there's space to provide a separate pedestrian pathway, nor would it necessarily be safe to paint a pedestrian pathway that goes across everybody's garages. I don't know.
I see. Okay. Oh, and one more question I forgot to ask to the staff is, for the building C, since it's the building just built against the the boundary between the R1 and RM30. So per the zoning requirement, the rear yard daylight plan, it will start from the setback and then goes up and then 90-degree instead of from the property line, right? If it is for the R1 zoning.
We are treating it based on the RM30 zoning. So because the areas within the RM30 zone are subject to the RM30 zone. And the RM30 zone district standard is to measure 10 feet up or 10 feet up at the property line and a 45-degree angle in. So it follows that standard.
Okay. So as what my colleague just mentioned, I also have the same concern about the alley that created between the private yard behind the building C and the R1, the single family zone. So I would suggest you, if that alley is really just for unit, only one unit of the building C, then I would suggest you to consider doing the same thing as what you proposed for the building A, how they access to the patio or to the trash enclosure. Maybe you will just go through the in front of the garage instead of have a alley behind the private yard. In that case, they will also have a larger private yard at the back. And also for the materials, the elevations, I think there need to be more defined details between different materials, what is the detailed treatment between different materials. And also for the building A, the end unit, the 2-story unit facing single family, I would suggest to raise the plate height, the window sill to over 5 feet so that you will not look over their backyard. So that's all my comments for now. Thank you.
Would you mind repeating that last comment you just made? I didn't understand.
So for the building A, the end unit, if you look at the elevation, let's see. Sheet 8.7, building A west elevation. So typically, if it's for single family residence, we will require the sill height to be 5 feet above, right? So that you will not have the chance to look over to your neighbor's backyard. So I would suggest to raise this window sill height.
I
So isn't this
believe,
shown as opaque or
yeah, those are
translucent
all
glazing?
shown as opaque windows.
How do you tell?
Just a,
And let me look.
right here.
Sorry, it's,
Okay.
yeah, in the
yeah, I was
actual
questioning
printed
about-
plans that I think it got.
And it really should be translucent glazing. though. Glazing is not opaque.
Obscured.
Obscured, sorry, is what we said.
We're asking for frosting. It doesn't have to be blackout windows. It needs to be just frosted so you can't see through it.
But words have meaning. And
Yes, that's why I'm clarifying.
thank you. Okay,
Okay, thank you.
good discussion there. Board Member Hirsch, would you care to go next?
No.
No. Okay. Board Member Rosenberg, your turn. Fair enough. No, it's not yet.
Appreciate the applicant, appreciate the public coming in to speak as well. We always appreciate hearing your comments and we do take those input very seriously. Sort of a broad look at this project. I think the overall stepped heights and the fact that they're townhouses is actually pretty respectful to the location that it's in. Very pleased with that this is not another massive building. It's sort of a nice transition, as you said, between the one on El Camino that's going to be very high density and with these residential. So this feels like a very nice transition project between those two spaces. The zoning itself, I think is actually, you guys handled that very cleverly. The fact that you've got the R1 little strip, you just said, we'll respect it, call it a day. I actually think that allows for a nice boundary between the residences and these properties here. I also appreciate that you stepped down the units that are closest to the residences. Again, paying deference and being respectful of the neighbors is always nice. I'm going to dive into a couple things, and I apologize if they're sort of all over the place. One, in respect to what Board Member Chen had stated about the pathways. Yeah, I agree that the pathways are a little hit and miss here. The ones from Building A don't exist to the trash enclosure. I think that's fine. The one from Unit 15 seems a little excessive considering it's one unit that needs this pathway. So I'm inclined to really almost remove that back when I see that there's a fire meter and a mechanical closet there. But whatever's not necessary, allow that to be landscaping, allow that to be hedging, allow that to be, again, more space to add privacy and greenery between the residences and these units. That being just a pathway itself is a little concerning. On that same vein, I'm curious as to what that rear line fence is going to be. How tall is it going to be? What material is it going to be? I want to make sure that the headlights coming in this first driveway are not shooting over the top of the trash enclosure and hitting the residences behind it. So just making sure we've got appropriate screening would be definitely helpful. The single sad patio, I'm not calling it sad. It's just like, I love patios. They're joy, they're life. And so I almost am wondering if this area on the right where it's green, is that potential for a secondary patio? Is that supposed to be green? It's just a little more clarity would be helpful. Along the lines of the trash enclosures, again, Board Member Adcock brought this up quite astutely. And I'm of the opinion that you kind of have two driveways here, and maybe they should be split, and you should have two trash enclosures, one at the end of this driveway that could be smaller and allow for more space back there to screening, greenery, and maybe the one for building C and D is actually to the right of that unit 15, and again, smaller. So that those two buildings are going one way down the garage driveways, the other two units are going the other way. Does that make it a little bit more of a headache for the maintenance to bring the trash up? Maybe. Or maybe since everyone's walking their trash all over the place, this is a little bit simpler of a solution, that these guys go close and these guys go close. Along that same vein, I'd probably split the mailboxes as well. This is something the staff had brought up, that they have concerns about the mailboxes. And for the most part, I have noticed that people who live in, townhouses, things like that, as they drive in, they stop their car, get their mail, and then continue to their garage. So having that mailbox, again, right next to the entrance of that first drive aisle and right next to the entrance of the second drive aisle, splitting the mailboxes, again, units A and B, get theirs, units C and D, get theirs. Food for thought. Soft close to the trash enclosures. I love that. I think that's really important, especially being right back to back with the residential. Landscaping, the roof terraces. Again, I love that you guys paid deference to the residential and kept those roof terraces to the front units and the taller units. I see no world in which a 3-foot tall parapet would be acceptable between those units. That's a safety hazard as well as anything else. If somebody leaves their rooftop door open and somebody climbs from one, it's 3 feet tall is not enough. So whatever that privacy screening is, we'd love to see what that material is. We'd love to have that noted as a permanent structure and not optional, because this is a safety concern at that point. Let's see. For the rear units, just in response to the public comment about getting it a bit more residential, have you guys considered the possibility of reducing those gray walls by actually having a sloped roof on units 4 and 5? Maybe all of building C has a variation of sloped roofs. So something to consider, that maybe that, by sloping an angled roof on that back portion, it would A, reduce the gray wall, and B, again, provide some transition to residential and complement your trash enclosure, which is actually quite cute. So I do appreciate the design of that as well. But just considering whether those more residential units have a more residential feel and transition as well. My last comment would be this wonderful patio, again, a way to get some of that water back into the, recirculating back to the water table would be to just make that patio permeable pavers. All right, it's a pretty quick and easy solution for, instead of having that be a paved concrete patio with pavers on top, maybe making it permeable. Oh, sorry, one last comment and I'm done. The pathway that goes from the front units of building B sort of stops at unit 5. And if you are expecting people to walk that around to the trash enclosure, it looks like there's a connection missing. And the reason I say that is I don't think people will want to bring their trash through the patio especially if there's a bunch of people hanging out there. Imagine if birthday parties going on. You don't want to be carrying your Sunday's trash out through a little picnic. So I'd say maybe there's just a slight connection right next to the patio on the left side between unit 5 and that pathway, just so it's continuous, but we'll see what you guys come up with. Thank you very much for your presentation, your time. Thank you to the public. That's all I have.
Thank you, Board Member Rosenberg. So I will chime in next. And I find myself very much in agreement with what Board Member Rosenberg has said. So I'm going to speak to some of the issues I think are important, but I find overall it's excellent site planning. Done a wonderful job working in with the neighborhood, building something that sort of fits, it's compatible. You're also getting the units you need. It'll be a wonderful addition to the community. And the way you've respected the neighbors behind you, I think is really well done. At a high level, it really works well. And I'm looking forward to seeing this go forward. This is mostly to staff, but I believe that there's a greater grade change on the site than is indicated on these drawings. The back of the property now, where it abuts the houses at Olive, has a large berm with plants. And behind the berm, the grade is significantly lower than the grade of the site itself by at least 2 feet, possibly 3. And what's important about that is that's where the daylight plane measurements actually should start, is at that existing grade at the back property line. And the drawings all seem to show the grade, the daylight plane beginning at the grade of the project, which I believe is somewhat higher. And that's quite significant regarding the impact to the neighbors at the back. So I'd really appreciate a focus on that. Unfortunately, the drawings in front of us do not have those grades. You have a great surveyor involved, but they skipped placing elevations on the drawing, so it's hard for us to be sure. There's a few dimensions on one of the grading on the drainage plan, but it's all a plus or minus. I'm suspecting that maybe it was never measured. But to staff, please hold the line tight on that one. It's a rather notable difference, and it will make a big difference to the neighbors. I'm concerned about 2 of the roof decks that are most abutting Olive Avenue. Again, looking to avoid having privacy impacts to the neighbors on Olive Avenue. On buildings A and B, the back units each have roof decks, which I believe can look into the neighbors' backyards. And that's really unfortunate. They're relatively tall and they have a pretty direct view in. On most projects, we really want to see some sort of buffers like a landscaping planter, high walls, anything to keep people from standing at the edge of those upper roof decks. I don't know, I don't see anything in our objective standards requiring that. I thought we had gone through quite a bit of discussions though about balconies and how close to the edge you could be if they looked into neighbors' privacy.
Yeah, so apologize. The objective standards list, it seemed like there was something missing. It did not apply to this project though, because those standards were when you're within, it was either 30 or 40 feet of, if you have a deck within 30 or 40 feet of the of other windows, basically. And in both scenarios, there were no decks that were within 40 feet.
Okay, so still, I don't see it on the checklist though, do I?
Yeah, I think that there, we kind of created this checklist and I think there was a missing piece to the checklist. So we'll have
Okay,
to fix
thanks.
that on the
I
objective
think
standards
even
checklist.
if indeed this complies with our standard, that's great.
Yeah.
It's important to document that.
Mhm.
This will be potentially a source of concern to the neighbors when it gets built.
Yeah.
So let's be really clear. If it is far enough away, then great, it's done with on that. In the same vein, I believe we had come up with a process for putting out a material list of approved or recommended materials that would be considered appropriate for these things. I bring that up because I'm not sure fiber cement panels were directly allowed. And yet I don't see that in the checklist, and I do see that on this application. To my colleagues, we had proposed that we would have a list of materials created by the Director of Planning, which would be updated every so often by the ARB, that applicants would choose from to meet that. The basic finding we have is high quality materials. We debated it at length, and I think that needs to be enforced.
So yes, we do have a list of approved materials. And I believe the one that we're fitting under is fiber reinforced cement siding and panels is allowed for 100% of the facade area.
And we didn't have any greater detail on what texture detailing was allowed on that. I thought there was. No. Maybe I just lost the vote on that one then. So in any case, right now, I'm just asking that we be sure that this complies with that objective standard that we created. I'd like to echo what Board Member Rosenberg said about the pitched roof. If there's any way to consider putting a different roof form on that building C, and maybe the lower elements at the back of buildings A and B, just pitching the roof, what it would give you is a roof eave. And that would be so much easier to look at for the neighbors. It would probably save you money. It's a cheaper roof to put asphalt shingles on than to do this flat roof with a parapet. And I think it would look good too. It would give that box just a little bit more character. So there's nothing in our findings requiring it. And either way, it meets the big picture of stepping down to the neighbor. But consider, it would look better, be cheaper to build, nicer for the neighbors. It's a win. And then lastly, I think your trash collection, I'll be blunt, just doesn't work. There's no way people are going to not have their own bins in their garages and find a way for that to be the thing they put out on trash day. Nobody's going to carry their trash that distance across other people's backyards to do this. It's just not going to happen. So I don't know where this requirement is coming from that we're looking at, but what Board Member Rosenberg suggested makes a heck of a lot of sense. Just have two centrally located places people can put their trash. That's each one you just walk down the street or your drive aisle, which is where people feel comfortable carrying trash. And accept that there's going to be bins in people's garages too. That's how people live. And so I think what we're seeing here is not a realistic solution. Again, I don't see anything in our objective standards regarding the functionality of trash. And to be honest, it's come up a couple of times on recent projects, the basic functionality of these things. You're about to put your finger on the microphone, Claire, go ahead.
I mean, so couple thoughts. I did ask the applicant to indicate the distance and everything was 200 feet or less, which is what, it's not in our objective standards, but what was discussed in general in terms of other things. And so with that in mind, I didn't comment on it significantly further. I think that, we could think about it a little bit more and ask the applicant to think about it more, but offhand, it's unclear to me where a different trash enclosure would be placed that wouldn't conflict with stormwater easements or transformers or bike parking.
And why do we need the trash enclosure again? Why can't folks just have trash bins in their garages and put them out to be collected?
Each unit has to have 3 bins: compost, trash, and recycling. And when they lined it all up on the street, and it's a fairly narrow street, and so they don't allow stacking anyway for the pickup, but when you line it up on the street, it exceeded their frontage. And so they literally could not fit that many bins along their frontage. Because it would have to all be on Acacia. And so Zero Waste said they need to have a common trash enclosure with bins that get brought out to the street.
So this seems to me like a typical conflict of regulations in the city. I believe that most townhomes don't try to do this. Board members Hirsch and Shen, didn't you do some research on these? What was the common solution, or what do you think?
It's very interesting because, glad you asked. Yeah, the one that really comes to mind is Arbor Real, where it's brought out to the street. There are 30 or so trash containers on each side of the street, on garbage day, and they sit there all day. So, I can't say that that's really terrific. And in fact, some of those people have to take their garbage bins back to you can imagine sort of dragging them back. Even us in single family homes have to do this, so, but it's a short distance, like 20, 20 feet to the house, right? But these places had it and it's very distant. I don't think that, my feeling is that there are better ways and and Arbor Real is a very early project, now that's a old project in Palo Alto. So there may be better ways, but I think that we are reaching a sort of a consensus at this table here about the issue of garbage on this particular site. So we should sum it up in some way and then ask them, all of them, to deal with this. But yeah, it doesn't work exactly right when you have it. So, but in this case, let's think about that. What do you really have here? 16, 3 times 16, right?
48 bins.
Yeah, 48 garbage cans on the street. Doesn't seem like that's the best way either.
Board Member Chen, you were part of that ad hoc committee on townhomes. Did you discover anything more enlightening for us about the trash
Yeah,
collection?
no, not really. Yeah, we noticed the problem, and is there a better solution? We don't know, but we did notice for some newer communities, like the ones we visited in Mountain View. Some of them, they just put their cash bins in front of their garage. So I'm not sure, like in that case, what is the minimum distance they required between garage to garage?
Yes, that's correct, and some of the parts of Arbor Real, the same thing. They put their garbage right outside the garage, and the truck picks them up somehow. It's in this case, it isn't a difficult issue at all. It's a small project.
Yeah, I think that's the issue, is that historically, I think that was happening. But more and more, the trash pickup is unwilling to take on the liability of going down dead end aisles and having to back out. They also, I think it's a liability. It's also the noise of the back out. And so they will not pick up on dead end aisles anymore. And so that's why, no, I think historically that's what happened, is like they just got brought out in front and yeah.
So on this project, all the trash is stored in 3 large bins in that trash container, and does that get wheeled out by the residents to the curb, or do they back in to pick that up?
There's going to be, I envisioned putting a requirement in the CCNRs for the project. It would be a requirement of the vesting tentative map that the CCNRs include a requirement for a maintenance person to come and bring it out, and or if they assign somebody in the HOA to bring out the trash.
Really? So 16-unit townhome is going to have that ongoing maintenance expense every week? They have to pay somebody to bring the trash bins to the curb?
They would have to.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm going to sum up my opinion to the applicant. You're pretty much going to be able to do whatever you want. We don't have any regulations, and our hands are tied. And this is a chance. You look like creative, exciting developers. Solve this problem, because everything we've discussed is not satisfactory. One trash bin is not going to be used the way everybody thinks. I very much doubt the HOA is going to go for a continuing expense like she just described. 48 separate trash bins is a ridiculous solution. You won't be able to sell the balance of your townhomes when everybody sees what that looks like. So figure something out. I just encourage you strongly, and tell us what you'd come up with so we can push that elsewhere. It's a tricky problem. I get it. Board Member Hirsch, your turn to speak.
Well, I'd like to sort of deal with that particular issue first then, so, I go along with everybody who's saying here that it isn't sufficient to have one. And it's really terrible for Unit 15 to take their garbage all the way that distance, just to 200 feet, really, it's not fair. So I don't see why it isn't somehow possible to, is this site plan so exactly fixed in cement that you can't take building C and shift it a little bit and get enough space at that far end in the corner there to get one more trash container there? And since somebody's taking the trash to the street for the garbage man to have it nice and easy, then they take a second one and go to the street as well. But it seems to me that, I'm making a suggestion here, just as we shouldn't assume that this is absolutely carved in stone everywhere everything sits here. Building C could move just another 4 or 5 feet and make it possible to have a second garbage location. So that's just one. There's been discussions about the privacy of yards, and I think there has to be some fencing about private yards in the back. And I want to say, I agree with my fellow board member here that you need something to define the yards. And we usually ask questions about the fencing. What is it? What does it look like? What are the materials? So we need more information about that, In general, I would like to speak about the whole project, because we hope you're going to actually come back because there's a lot of things to solve. They don't have it.
This project does not come back.
Does not
to the
come
board.
back. Well, we better get everything out then today. And it's surprising that we used to speak a lot about elevations, but we have forgotten your elevation. And I think that's disastrous not to talk to you about that because it's very interesting, that part of it. But to go into some of the detail, continue on some of the detail, I think that the comment about mail is a similar situation. And it's absolutely correct. Put it next to the driveways going in. Then everybody can stop their car for a moment, pick up the mail and go into their house. The privacy yards and mail, the center paseo, we sort of haven't talked about that. And, in some way, the paseo is something more special to that area. And I find that in there's a kind of a shift in the circulation in unit number 6 in B. Unfortunately, has everybody kind of that continues on that path, walking right in front of their door and window. And it seems to be that's pretty unfair. Everybody else gets privacy except for that particular unit. And that is in part because there's some need for furniture, bicycles, etc. There's a strange thing here. The furniture really, as far as I can remember, in the objective standards, really is for a larger building, that there should be some kind of it's a mistake. And so look at objective standards relative to your project here. That's not you're going to provide seating in the area where you have cookout or whatever, the common area there. You don't need it anywhere else really in this project. Okay. So you've satisfied that issue right there. I just want to comment about common areas, though, that we've taken a look at some, and there's some in Mountain View that are really rather terrific. And they have a courtyard that's 50 feet wide, in between the housing there. And they run the perimeter driveway all around the outside where there's guest parking that works for that development. But I emphasize the fact that in the center courtyard, they have these outdoor cooking privacy areas, and they're really kind of beautifully organized and sort of centrally kind of arranged for the furniture and the cookout thing. And I think you need to work on that area and make it kind of cohesive. And so it's cohesive socially and functionally, it's just not that way right now. So there's more work to be done there just to make it a nice, you could actually, I don't see why there has to be a little greenery around the outside. You could push it over a little bit, especially if building C has to move for the garbage reason. Then you move this over to the pathway itself at that point. It could do that and get to little more space so that you can make it more cohesive as an element in the back there. I don't understand why I was going to say that you could continue the pathway in the back, but I don't think that's going to be necessary if you get two garbage locations. So, okay, Center Paseo, and you know what's going to happen at the end of that driveway down there? There's going to be a basketball hoop. That's what happens in these driveways. I see it all over the place, and you know, there's always got to be. I mean, they're all over our streets. Everybody has a basketball hoop, and it sits in the street. So I think that's what's really going to happen at the end of the parking area there, because that's an exclusive kind of a private area where you can bounce your ball and throw and get some distance, et cetera, you know, and no conflict, or minimal conflict with cars at that point. So, you know, I mentioned before some of the detailing of the facade, and maybe I should just go into the facade, because there's some areas in the facades, you know, I think that, you know, I know a little bit about your work because I think in our study of our townhomes projects, we ran into another one of your projects somewhere around. I don't remember where it was, but I think you guys do a terrific job with your elevations. You know, I like the way the elevations work here so much, in the way you use materials and the way you vary materials. We've had other projects which we've objected to the way in which that worked. But my personal opinion is that you guys really do a good job with the relationship. You don't make each house kind of define itself. That would be another way to do it, you know, where each one with all of the detail of the house is what is the term for our wonderful style here? Style? No. Anyhow, carpenter kind of style, you know, that we have in Palo Alto. Each house with all of the detail, and you sort of say, carpenter, go to it, you know, you do it, make it look nice. But you guys do it differently, and the materials have a patterning to them that do not define the house specifically. They're part of a building. You know, they're a common thing. I think that's a nice, really nice. And I want to also say that Chair Bolte was absolutely correct. The site planning is very, very well done. For this particular site, it's the right site planning. And I shouldn't forget the fact that the planning, the apartment planning is very, very well done and very varied in its, you know, so you have a choice of different possibilities. As you look into this project, you can take A, B, C, D, you know, you get a choice of apartments to choose from at the beginning. And I think it's exciting that way. And the window patterning is different, you know, in each place here. So with bigger windows where they should be and smaller windows where they should be, and some playfulness with the windows. So, you know, some work is yet to be done. I'm going to leave it just like that. Some work is yet to be done on some of your elevations when you really get them up big and look at it in detail. I think you'll make some changes, but your direction is terrific on the elevations, and I don't think it behooves us not to give you credit for that one. Let's see. So, you know, some cases, I think that just a sort of a reminder, I think you should look for some alignments that there's really, when you don't have a very good reason to make a 1 foot difference, alignments are useful. The roof terraces, I thought the comments were very good about the roof terraces. You know, they have to be private spaces. And those fencing, the way you do fencing up there is going to be critical to the facades of the buildings as well. um, I absolutely disagree with some of my fellow board members here about sloping roofs. This project is not a sloping roof project. This project is rectangular in all respects. And please don't do the sloping roofs. I'm going to get shot for that one, but I think, let me just quickly run through, just because I spent a lot of time looking at your elevations and so on. I think that one thing, if we were to get another presentation, I'd like to ask for, and since we can't, it seems unfortunate, but I would love to ask for the ways in which you have materials meet materials, which is always pretty damn critical, and you haven't shown us exactly, maybe I didn't look deep enough, but I'm going to trust you on that one because you've done this before. So pretty much those are my thoughts. I think it's going to be a terrific project and I really look forward to it. I'm sorry we can't see it as it develops, but we'll see it when it gets built. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Hirsch. Board Member Adcock, did you want to add something to this? You started out saying you had other thoughts. Just want to give you an opportunity.
Sorry, I think we've covered all of my conversations. Going back to the trash discussion, though, as you recommended, I don't think having 48 bins is the way to go, but there's definitely room for improvement in the pathways going towards 1 or 2 trash areas, and really think about each person living in each one of those units. How are they taking their bag of trash to their area? And then, like we already mentioned, the pathway in the back, really think about that closely. The fencing in those 2 building C units, how that relates to the pathway, how that affects the privacy and views from the Olive Street in the back. So, yeah, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you very much, Board Member Adcock. So at last, I'll give Board Member Chen to speak if she wishes to on a sketch she made. You don't have to if you don't think it's.
Yeah, well, most of the board members mentioning about the trash enclosure, how the trash collection problem. I was just sketching something fast on a piece of paper like this. So I was thinking about, I was wondering if you could consider separate the building B. Maybe eliminate building B and make both building C and building D longer so that you could, instead of having 2 driveways, you could create a loop that the garbage truck can go inside and go pick up their trash bins in front of their garage. So you could have 2 more units on the left side of units building C and 3 more units on the left side of building B, and connecting the 2 driveways, and then you will save your trash enclosure space to be your common patio space. That's just one thought.
Thank you very much for that thought. And to the applicant offline, if you'd like to speak to Board Member Chen, feel free to do so. To the staff, we're not looking for a motion of any kind on this. It's a study session.
We are not looking for a motion. I've been kind of generally taking a list of notes that I'm happy to put up on what I'm hearing seems to be consensus. I don't know if you want to.
What's the point? I mean,
or I could reference what I'm hearing, just for the purposes of staff kind of conveying some ideas to the applicant of things we might want improvements on.
but the reality is this is a objective standard project. If they meet that checklist.
Yes.
So whether we
yes.
like the detailing on the elevation is not really
Yeah.
germane, is it?
So you can make comments, but what I'm hearing is not related to objective standards, so they would not be required. I think the only one that I did note was you had asked staff to really review closely and ensure that the correct elevation is being used for the rear daylight plane. So I think that's something we can look at closely. I would say with regard to the privacy screens, staff was not aware that this might not be added, and it does seem like it's a detail that's shown on the plans, and it seems relevant to the design and what we were reviewing. And so if that's, there's no requirement for a privacy screen, but if they're proposing it on the plans, we would expect them to construct that.
And like Board Member Rosenberg mentioned, it's kind of a security concern too between units. So I would definitely put that in consideration.
Safety is definitely objective, so.
Yes.
I don't see that much point though in going on further on the details here. We've all said our piece.
Yeah. Is it okay to make a recommendation on a condition of approval though regarding the concession that's being requested about the planting on the private landscape area?
Absolutely. What are you referencing?
I would recommend that every unit at least have a hose bib in their terraces. So if they choose to do their own planting, they have some way to water their plants. Even if landscaping is not provided for the concession that they're asking
So it's a
for.
wonderful condition of approval that, can we recommend a condition of approval? Take one hand and put it behind your back and let the other one go next to it. So I don't know what to say. It's an excellent idea.
It's a good suggestion. We don't have any code requirement related to that. But I think it's something we could suggest to the applicant. I know that generally they have expressed to me, and if they're happy to speak to it, they don't have to, but I know they have suggested that they are happy to put, removable planters or something up on the rooftop. And so maybe this would speak to how you would water removable planters. I don't know if you want to, whether you would be willing to add a hose bib.
We discussed it internally. We actually have a lot of concerns about having a hose bib on those rooftop decks, because if somebody leaves it on, it's a huge water intrusion issue now. And especially with construction litigation these days on condominiums, it just opens us up to a lot of liability. I love the idea of landscaping on the rooftop deck, both for aesthetic reasons and for privacy. So I think potted plants is a good way to go. And I think we'd have no issue putting something like that on the roofs.
Without irrigation.
Well, I just ran it by our construction department and our legal department, and they just got very uncomfortable. And then we've actually, and I'm happy to coordinate with Claire, we reached out to our HOA general counsel about how it's typically handled. And they said typically they're not seeing hose bibs on individual condominium rooftop decks. That's just the feedback we got. And
Honey, take out the trash, and 20 minutes later, it's honey, go water the plants on the roof, right?
Yeah,
Both
no.
of those are very realistic, but I think we're done with this project. Thank you very much. So if we can close this out, we've given you our opinion. It's a study session. There's no motion to be given. So we're going to move on to the next item on our agenda, which is
Thank you.
minutes from previous meetings. My packet is thoroughly in pieces now, so if somebody could refresh my memory which item we're looking at here.
We're looking at,
Item 5.
correct, it's the Architectural Review Board draft minutes, August 17th, 2023.
Okay, so we're looking for a motion on that item number 5.
I move to approve the minutes as written.
I second. Okay, moved and seconded. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Abstain.
Wait,
That
what
wasn't
you
at the
called your
meeting.
name?
We're not looking, but only Claire.
Could we have a roll call vote, please, on item number 5?
Okay. Do we need a roll call?
Yes.
Board Member Adcock,
Abstain.
Board Member Chen,
Yes.
Board Member Hirsch,
Yes.
Vice Chair Rosenberg,
Yes.
Chair Balte,
Yes.
motion carries 401.
Thank you. Next item is the minutes from meeting on September 7th, 2023. That's item number 6. Again, any discussion? If not, I'll take a motion, please.
I move to approve the minutes as noted.
I'll second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion? If not, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Board Member Adcock,
Can I just note a correction on every time lead is mentioned, it is noted in lowercase LEAD, but I think you're referring to LEED in all uppercase. That's my only
So
correction.
is that a friendly
catch.
amendment? to the
Friendly amendment, but
motion?
otherwise
So
abstain.
Is that amendment accepted?
Friendly amendment accepted.
And the seconder, do you accept that?
Yeah, accepted.
Okay, so we have an amendment to that motion, moved, seconded. Can we have a roll call vote on the motion, please, as amended?
yes. Board Member Adcock,
Abstain.
Board Member Chen,
Yes.
Board Member Hirsch,
Yes,
Vice Chair Rosenberg,
Yes.
Chair Balte,
Yes,
motion carries 401.
thank you. Last item is board member questions, comments, and announcements. And as predicted, we're running out of time, but David, I promised you a few minutes to make a statement about your item. I'll give you 5 minutes, David, please.
I probably won't need it, but
Good.
okay.
Let's start a timer,
Uh,
please.
Starting now. So, absolutely the information that we've been handed here has got to be read and digested, and there's an awful lot to go through there. Impressive that you guys can put that together. All this impressive. For this past week, I've been sort of thinking about the whole issue of the housing and dangerously thinking about it because I go too far each time. But what strikes me is that we're missing something, and I call it urban design. There are pieces of urban design that go beyond planning in some way. So imagine that we have the new construction happening on parking lots, let's say in downtown, which Peter and I are very interested in promoting in some way. There are issues about how you do something like that that don't seem to get addressed here. And I wonder if our board can be interested in thinking about this. Something to do with what is density and massing that isn't just a matter of verbal description or written description. It would have to do with diagramming some issues in the downtown and seeing how they actually look, which really requires an architectural point of view. The site access diagrams, parking schemes, alternatives, commercial requirements, suggested locations, community open space consideration, including related neighborhood impacts, special zoning considerations for unique sites, public utility requirements and costs, affordable housing considerations. Well, all of these, are mentioned in some way here in kind of mathematical terms, the way the zoning actually works. But they also then have a reflection into conceptual planning and urban design. And I just want to say one thing about it is that other cities do have separate organizations that deal with this and deal with development so that you get, even at the very best of them all, you get something like a High Line in New York, which is dealt with as a kind of a completely different structure within the city. I don't know where I'm going with this exactly, but I'm thinking that it strikes me that every time we do things in planning here, we're missing some opportunity. And I think that we demonstrated that in our Hamilton Avenue project. And I think it should be looked at with the thought that the design there did some things that are quite unique, like insisting on daylighting in garages, in some way of doing that when you have a garage under a building. So I think we need to talk about those kind of aspects of urban design as they will affect the city. And I feel that it's something that is missing here. And secondly, only secondly at this point, but very importantly, these things should be thought of in terms of financial possibilities so that if you build a building on a parking lot, which is owned by the city, and the city leases the parking lot to a developer, what do you get in return? Could you get a significant differently number of affordable housing units in a project that you build on a parking lot? And should that be considered? What happened, I'm running out of my 5 minutes, I'm sure, but what happened is that the city actually asked affordable housing developers to look at the sites in the downtown and didn't say, what happens if we have a private developer and we negotiate a deal with a long-term lease? We mentioned that. And you say, we're looking for affordable housing, more than 15%, you know? Maybe 35 or 40% of the house of it could be affordable housing. That's a real possibility. Who does that? Who in the city does that?
David, we're,
Yeah.
5 minutes.
I'm going to leave it just like that. Who does it?
Good. That's a great way to leave.
Mhm.
Appreciate the intensity and integrity behind your comments. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay.